My boss put a fist through the wall. I am a new attorney. I have been practicing for 6 months and I have been with the same firm for 6 months. The pay is great and higher than most other jobs available to someone with my experience. My boss prides herself on being a mentor to new attorneys. However, my boss has something of a reputation in my community. In the last year, she has lost 4 attorneys who all quit and walked off. This is a small firm, so losing 4 was a huge blow. Of the attorneys who quit, my boss has harassed all of them. She sued the first one for her shoes and she filed ethics complaints against her and she's getting ready to sue her again. The second one to quit my boss sued to claw back her bonus pay. The third one to quit was a doozy. The third one to quit and took her client files with her. My boss lodged multiple ethics complaints against her, filed criminal complaints against her, and sued her. The third one to quit had to go into deep hiding at her new firm, because my boss and her husband called and harassed her constantly. Despite the drama with the former employees, I haven't felt much of it until recently. My boss hasn't been a great boss, but she has made an effort to mentor me. She answers my questions and occasionally looks over my work. There are issues though. She doesn't believe in hiring paralegals or trained legal professionals, so we just have generic staff. Of our staff we have gone through 8 since I started, including one who was fired after being drunk on the job. As a result, our work is often not done on time or it's sloppy. My boss also has a philosophy of never firing a bad client. This has become a big issue in the firm. We most recently had a client with a long history of fraud. My boss had me draft a motion and affidavit, which the other side pointed out was entirely fraudulent the day before the motion hearing. We had to withdraw the motion and apologize to the court. The client then stiffed us on our bill. My boss still won't let us fire him and now I have to work on his case for free. Despite all this, I have stuck with it until now. The wall punching incident. My boss and her husband brought a criminal detective into the office to talk about one of the former attorneys. I could hear them across the wall. They were screaming and swearing at the detective about how the former employee is a effing spy. I then heard a loud thump and saw my boss's husband shake his bruised fist. Dude put his fist through a wall. It was frightening to watch. That same night, a rival firm reached out to me unsolicited. They have several of the former attorneys from my firm and they have offered me a job as well. Same pay. Actual paralegal. Mentoring. And no one puts their fist through drywall. I feel guilty about leaving my firm and being disloyal, but I think I need to go for my own safety. This is wild. What's something that someone can do that makes you instantly hate them? You thought you'd seen it all. You thought you'd heard every story, experienced every emotion, and witnessed every kind of cruelty. But you were wrong. Dead wrong. Picture this. You're sitting in a classroom, trying to survive another dull day at this hellhole they call school. The teacher is droning on about some obscure historical event, and you find yourself fixated on the countdown until the end of this torturous period. Suddenly, in the midst of your daydreaming, you hear a loud, obnoxious laugh that makes your blood boil. You look over and see him, the epitome of everything you hate. This egotistic, arrogant prick who thinks he's God's gift to humanity. He's the kind of person who always has to be the center of attention, always trying to one-up everyone with his superiority complex. You can't help but despise him instantly. He struts around with an air of entitlement, making snide remarks at others and belittling their achievements. Every time someone shares an accomplishment or a heartfelt story, he just has to chime in and overshadow it with his own self-aggrandizing tales. The mere sight of his self-satisfied smirk is enough to make you want to punch a wall. But it's not just his overt narcissism that makes you hate him. It's the way he treats people, like they're beneath him. He's quick to tear others down with cutting remarks and callous insults, relishing in their discomfort. You've witnessed him actively sabotage others just to boost his own fragile ego, leaving a trail of shattered dreams and broken friendships in his wake. And it's not just you. The entire school seems to have a collective disdain for this guy. You see the looks of annoyance and eye rolls whenever he enters a room. Yet, somehow, he remains blissfully ignorant, convinced that everyone adores him. Perhaps it's because he's surrounded himself with a small group of sycophantic followers who eagerly fuel his ego, offering praise and applause at his every cruel remark. But here's the thing. Despite all the people he's hurt, all the relationships he's destroyed, you can't help but wonder if deep down, he's just compensating for something. Maybe he's hiding a fragile, insecure soul beneath that armor of arrogance. Or maybe he's just a scummy person through and through. Who knows? As the school year goes on, tensions rise. His toxic presence creates a palpable atmosphere of animosity. Everyone is walking on eggshells, waiting for the next snide comment or malicious action. It becomes a game of survival, a battle of wits and resilience. And then, one fateful day, something happens that changes everything. You hear whispers in the halls, rumors circulating like wildfire. From what you gather, it seems that karma has finally caught up with him. The details of what happened remain a mystery, but the outcome is clear. He's been stripped of his power, his reputation, and his pride. It's a comeuppance like no other, and you can't help but feel a sense of satisfaction as you watch his world crumble around him. The smug smirk has been wiped from his face, and he's left exposed in the most humiliating way possible. But the story doesn't end there. He's still here, still lurking in the shadows. He may have been humbled, but he's still a force to be reckoned with. He's determined to reclaim his throne, and you can't help but wonder if he'll succeed. Will he be able to rebuild his empire of ego and entitlement, or will he be forever banished to the fringes of society? Only time will tell. I hit 550 pounds. About a month ago I admitted to the internet I was too fat to travel and visit my dying father. I honestly didn't expect the overwhelming positive comments on my original post. Time will tell if this was my aha moment, but something did click when I read through the comments. I knew I had to try harder, if not for me then for my father, was in hospital ICU, so I did. Below is that journey. To recap, I needed to find a way to physically transport myself between two major cities of quite some distance, transport myself between houses and hospitals, and face my family and friends at hopefully what would be my final biggest size. I couldn't drive/have a friend drive me between the cities as this would be a several days journey and my friendships aren't that strong. I first started with what I distilled as a freight transport issue to solve. I found 3 medical transport specialist companies and 11 companies that will deliver anything marketing material. While I continued to have positive correspondence, all options were exhausted quite quickly. If you're wondering, 2 companies laughed directly at me, 2 hung up on me, and 1 suggested an option which was $12,000 and I had to sign a waiver, was the sketchiest of the options. None of the medical transport specialists would help given the distance to travel. I next turned to the airlines. One was quite helpful and convinced me it would be better and cheaper to buy a business class seat which had extra wide seat and more legroom over buying a neighboring seat. I used public transport to get to the airport, surprisingly went well, got to the plane, and then, I didn't fit in the seat. The armrests weren't adjustable. I tried to wedge myself in but my thigh would hard press against the backrest adjustment button so there was no way to keep the seat upright. I didn't get to the seatbelt issue, and there were no other seats available. I was rejected from the flight. Several emotions and events happened afterwards. I wouldn't be flying that day and I lied to my family why I wouldn't be flying. The airline called me the next day and offered me 2 economy seats at the same business class ticket price. Time of year and last minute tickets elevated the economy class ticket prices. The plane had rows of 3 and I didn't want to risk anything, so I bought another seat so I had the entire row. Given the time of the year, that one seat almost cost me the same as the original ticket cost. The middle seat armrests could be lifted, while one flight assistant had a problem with it being up on takeoff. That was my only option so we needed to go with it. The seatbelt extender wasn't an issue, they had it on hand. I was quite nervous about that, but they proactively brought it to me without asking. Yeah, I know, the need was obvious. I hadn't told my family I would be flying again in fear I'd run into another problem, and with a bit of a positive buzz from a successful flight I thought I'd surprise them. I tried 2 taxis, I couldn't get in the car. I tried a minivan taxi, and I couldn't wear the seatbelt. One taxi driver refused to look at me and locked their doors. I then decided to use public transport. This turned out to being a 4-hour journey as nothing was direct, but I made it to my parents' house. After all of that I couldn't find a way to transport myself to the hospital to see my father. I tried to sit in my mother's car in advance but wouldn't fit, so I lied again and said I had a bung knee and couldn't bend it when it came to visiting him. She didn't overly question this, but I'm sure she knew the real reason. After 28 days my father was released from the hospital on Christmas Day. I saw him at my parents' house. He is doing a lot better, has long COVID, and he never said anything to me about my weight. All of the family conversations were centered around my father. I couldn't find a way to start a conversation about myself either, even with my mother whom I'm the closest with. For another time, my mother suggested I use a different bathroom for showering. It had a bigger door to access it. I declined and squeezed into the usual bathroom. On reflection, she was trying to help me and be more comfortable. I'm an idiot for not picking up on this in the moment. I lied again when I returned home, saying I would catch a taxi as I had an ungodly hour of a flight. I repeated everything in reverse. As for my health, I have started another attempt at weight loss. I got a reading on my bathroom scales on Sunday for the first time. 555 pounds, 252 kilograms. My only positive from this is thinking that because I have a reading my weight must have declined from whatever it was over Christmas as previously my scales would error with maximum weight exceeded. Being morbidly obese sucks. I'm going to attempt to change that for me this year. Edit. I'm updating this post nearly 2 weeks after posting it. Similar to my first post, I wasn't prepared for all of the support and comments. It truly was unexpected. For those that gave awards, thank you, but you shouldn't have. What I did wasn't brave or heroic, and without my father being in the situation he was in I doubt I would have pushed myself this hard to make myself see him. That aside, I did learn some things about myself and the world I interact with as a result of this journey, and these will stay with me. I've included below additional information in relation to the various questions and discussions many have shared. Hopefully this helps to further shape your view of my situation, and for those that are perhaps in a similar situation. Not all airlines have a passenger of size policy. The airline choices that I had no such policy. The only thing offered to me was business class with wider seats, an exit row with extra leg room at extra cost, and the option to purchase additional neighboring seats. None of these options came with a discount. I've seen many medical professionals over the years, including those that specialize in weight loss. I have a medical care plan, have had blood work done, and I've seen a cardiologist. Without going into all of the specifics, I hadn't found a path with any of them that provided a strong direction to pursue treatment A, surgery B, nutrition plan C, etc. Some of the reason for that is definitely on me, but I also haven't felt the medical industry more broadly has been that accommodating for my situation. Many people have provided recommendations for certain weight loss related substances. This isn't for me. I've pretty much had no tablet/drug in my whole life besides vaccines. Maybe I have a phobia of this external help? My entire family are related to the medical/health industry in some way. I think this has negatively impacted my confidence to ask for help. Bizarre, I know, but maybe I'm just intimidated. Plus, I'm the only fat one in the family. A few people have suggested I may have an eating disorder. I haven't provided a lot of details around why I'm fat from the perspective of what I eat, but I will share that I know what is good food for me versus bad. I know what good portion sizes looks like, and I know when I'm eating in a way that is bad for me. Maybe for me I have a disorder, or an addiction. A medical professional would need to label it. I will need to consciously and continuously force myself to make good choices over relying on setting good habits. Real life doesn't really cater for morbidly obese people. I don't encourage acceptance, but more can be done to accommodate our needs, even if it's just to help us move around for medical appointments and utilize the most basic human services. You can charge us more for it. For me, it is the price I must pay for the poor choices I've made. I've continued to lose weight each week from the time of this post. I'm making an effort to keep this trend going. Daughter thinks my wife's underwear was a different girl's. My daughter, who's 20 years old, and her fiancé are currently staying over at our place. While I care a lot about my daughter, she can be quite challenging to handle, and her fiancé and I don't exactly see eye to eye. I had a chat with them about finding their own place since things have been a bit overwhelming for me. I just don't like having people around. Sure, it's my daughter, but I sort of want her to leave the nest and explore the world in a new way. Though I'm also hesitant because she is my daughter, and I don't want her to have too much to handle. The other day, my daughter and her fiancé had a huge argument while my wife was out. It seems that somehow, a pair of my wife's underwear ended up mixed in with their laundry, and my daughter thought her fiancé was up to no good. I couldn't help but notice that jumping straight to the idea of cheating doesn't bode well for their relationship. I don't know why her first thought wasn't that it would be the only other woman in the house. Maybe she didn't want to believe my wife had such risque underwear. But there they were, having this ridiculous fight, with my wife's floral print underwear being waved around. I actually recognized them but decided to let the situation play out. I just thought it was funny. However, just as things were reaching their peak, my wife returned home after about half an hour and confirmed that the underwear was indeed hers. When she asked me if I hadn't realized it, I couldn't help but let out an accidental chuckle. This caused my daughter to burst into tears, and now she's not speaking to me. As for her fiancé, he pretty much left in a hurry, clearly frustrated. Surprisingly, my wife found the whole situation amusing. I did, too. I didn't think it was that deep. But, was I the a-hole?
Told my stepmom she will never be my real mom and went no contact. Now my dad and her are stalking me and trying to force themselves into my life. My mom passed away when I was 14. I was always closer to her than my dad, so I took it very hard and still missed her every day. But my dad moved on extremely quickly. I'm talking about 1.5 months later, and he was openly dating his current wife, whom I suspect he was cheating with on my mom when she was still alive. She moved in 4 months after my mom's passing. Then 9 months after her passing, they announced their engagement on my birthday as one of my gifts. I obviously didn't take it well. I made a scene, dumped the cake they got me, and walked out. I disappeared for a few days until they were about to put out a missing person report, and I was forced to go back home. They tried to get rid of all evidence of my mom ever living there. As in, they tried to remove all pictures, personal effects, memories, and other belongings from my mom. I kept what I could and hid some others. They wouldn't let me celebrate her birthday or anything related to my mom. They tried to force me to call my stepmom mom, but I never did. And they would ignore me when I called her by her name. She would introduce herself as my mom and I would correct her every time. It got to the point that I stopped talking to her unless absolutely necessary or if I was correcting her. And these talks were usually one-word answers. My dad got angry every time I didn't call her mom, use her first name, or introduce her as my dad's wife. I once spent 2 weeks not talking to either of them when I was 16 because I was ruining their family dynamic. Their exact words were, "Until I can be a part of the family, there is nothing to say or do as one." But they caved at about the 15th day of no communication and interaction. I turned 18 and left for uni and went extremely low contact and didn't go back. When I was 21 I got engaged to my fiancé. She knows about my relationship with my dad and his wife. She respects it and is on my side. When they found out, my dad and his wife had a fit because they didn't know I was seeing anyone. My dad's wife posted on social media saying she was excited that her son, also known as me, was getting married, with a bunch of other things mentioning she can't wait until she becomes a grandma. I made a short post saying I am not and will never be her son and she won't be a grandma to any future kids. My dad got mad saying I was disrespecting my mother and embarrassing her. I asked who we were talking about because my only mother was my bio mom, and at this point I lost both of my parents on that day when I was 14. That was 3 years ago and we went back to low/no contact now. My wife is about 8 months pregnant and they randomly showed up at my house even though I never gave them my address. They wanted to talk and meet my wife, but I didn't let them in and told them to turn around and go back to where they came from. But apparently they decided they wanted to move to my city/state to be closer and repair the relationship between us. She said she missed her son and wanted to be a better mom and grandma. I called them delusional, told them to leave and slammed the door. They then bought a house about 5 minutes away from us. This has all been way too much for me and my therapist wants me to let them in, but I would rather cut all contact. It wouldn't be so bad if they just would stop trying to replace my mom and act like she never existed. I honestly don't know much about my dad's wife. I don't even know if I know who my dad is anymore. My wife is struggling to support me emotionally and doesn't know how to help. Please, internet strangers, how do I convince my dad and his wife that she is not and will never be my mom? Update 1. To answer some questions and to clarify, my wife, our unborn child, and I are doing well overall. My wife is over being pregnant at this point, and our child should be here in the coming weeks. I did find a new therapist. I called to cancel the rest of my appointments on the books, and he did not take that well, so I've put in a complaint. I met with my new one, and I like her a lot better. I feel like I'm actually being heard and getting the help I need. I want to make this clear. I am 24. My dad's wife is 38, my dad is 52, so when she entered my life, I was 14 and she was 28. There were also theories about how my dad might have had something to do with my mom's passing. That is not the case, but I still believe they were together before she passed. I am investing in a security system, but it will be a few weeks until they can install it. For now, we have a doorbell cam and some cheaper cameras. As for social media, since the post about her being excited about being a grandma and my wife and I getting engaged, we have locked down all social media. My wife and I are not active on any platforms anymore except for messaging or sharing pictures, and we found the leak as well. It was my brother-in-law, my wife's sister's husband. We had a family dinner where we had planned on working on the birthing plan. Brother-in-law was insistent on being there, which was odd as he was not a part of it to begin with. While we were waiting for my mother-in-law to get home, I shared what happened between my dad and how it made me and my wife feel, and my brother-in-law got visibly uncomfortable. When I called him out on it, he denied it, but it was obvious. Sister-in-law called him out and he broke down. He said he had been talking with them because we needed all the family support we could get and that they deserved to know their grandbaby. This caused an argument and it ended with my sister-in-law moving out and staying with us. They have no kids and have had some issues. I think it is over for them and I definitely will not be ever trusting him. Our birthing plan has been locked down now and made secure, but we have some just in case of crazy showing up plans. Everyone who needs to know the details knows now. It is surprisingly hard to get a protection order where I live. It is heavily dependent on violence or physical contact. Technically what they have done is not against the law, yet they are perceived as no real danger at this time. Since there were no threats made and they left when asked to, they have free will to move wherever they want. Also, since a family member gave another family member my address, it is fair game. In regards to grandparents' rights, it is only applicable when my wife and I have lost custody or are unable to care for them, but my mother-in-law and father-in-law will be taking on that role if needed. My wife and I are not currently in a position to move. We just bought our house when interest rates were low and my in-laws helped with the down payment. It is nothing massive, but it is home and perfect for our starter family. My dad and his wife are unable to have kids. I don't know from which side it made it impossible, so that may be why the constant pressure. I did write my dad a letter summing up why I want no contact, how I feel about what they did, and emphasizing that his wife is not my mom and never will be. If I feel like giving them a chance, it is on me and my family's terms, specifying that my family is me, my wife and any possible children moving forward. They are not to talk to my wife or me at any time unless it is through our lawyer. He can decide what information to pass on. They are not welcome around us at any point, including our house, school, daycare, social gatherings, birthdays, Christmas BBQs, etc., as well as in public. We are strangers. Keep space and act like we don't exist. If they break this, they will get a follow-up letter up to and including a protection order. The letter was quite long. Our lawyer looked it over and my wife and I signed it. Then he signed it as well and it was notarized. We made legal copies for all of our records. My lawyer went with a private delivery service and hand-delivered it to him with a signature of received goods plus video evidence as well. So far so good on that end. I'm now focused on my wife and soon-to-be child. I hope I'm ready. I know how not to be a father, so there is that. Is there anything else I should do or think of to protect my family? Update 2: in the weeks leading up to my wife giving birth, things were stressful. I ended up having my first panic attack, which was not fun. My wife helped me through that one. Brother-in-law tried to apologize and get back with my sister-in-law but messed it up by trying to explain himself again on how he was in the right, by reconnecting my parents and my family. After that their divorce has been moving quickly. My wife giving birth was an amazing experience for me. The moment I held my child for the first time amazed me. How can I love something so tiny and whom I just met so much so quickly? Both the baby and my wife are doing really well. My wife started saying she feels like a cow. I'm not sure how to make her stop, but she keeps randomly mooing at me. My dad and his wife tried to show up at the hospital. Still not sure how they found us or knew where we were, but staff blocked them and covered for us. As a bunch of you said, we would start running into them randomly around town, mainly in grocery and shopping stores. Even if I drove out of my way, we would sometimes bump into one or both of them. Law enforcement still says they are not doing anything against the law and don't seem dangerous or malicious. We did our best to ignore them, stay home, or have a family member get the items. My therapist has surely earned her paycheck in the last few months. My lawyer is trying their best, but the laws I feel are against us. Innocent until proven guilty, or in this case, nothing is dangerous until after it is, or hurry up and wait until something bad happens, then we might do something. It is super frustrating. We also moved. Now I never want to do that again. Good family helps, but with a newborn and crazy people around, it was stressful. I know it doesn't sound possible and I'm still in disbelief, but my in-laws are amazing and got us in contact with a friend of theirs. Long story short, these friends wanted to downsize since all of their kids moved out. They told my in-laws and brought them over and we ended up coming up with a really good deal. Our new home is bigger on more land, but needs a lot of work. It is old and outdated, but we have been making it for hours. Since moving, we had not seen my dad or his wife. That was until about 2 weeks ago. I was going to update and write all of the above, but then my lawyer contacted me saying my dad reached out and wanted to talk. I tried to say hard pass, but they advised me by saying, I think it would be in your best interest. So we set up a date and time in public. 3 days later, at a coffee shop, we met up. Even though we were early, they were waiting for us. It was just my wife and me and also a paralegal for my lawyer's office. Undercover, I could see the disappointment in their eyes that our child did not come with us. It started awkwardly. They initiated some small talk, but I just said, what do you want? Well, my dad's health is not well and is going downhill steadily. He may have 2 years at most. They showed scans, doctor's notes, tests, and other items to prove it. I was quiet the entire time they talked, and all I could think about is, that sucks for him. It was like getting news that someone you knew of when you were a child passed away. For me, no real emotion or feelings because I feel like I didn't have a real connection with them. My wife knew I was irritated and tried to silently calm me down. When they were done, I said something to the effect of, I'm sorry this happened to you. I hope you get better, and get up to walk out. His wife opened her mouth and said, something like, that's it? That's all you have to say? You owe it to him, too. I didn't let her finish and went off on them. I said everything that I've been saying in my head for years. A practice monologue I started when I was a teen. Highlights include, but are not limited to, how he owed me more than anything, how he ruined any type of relationship, the moment he started thinking with his lower half, when he tried to erase my real and only mom, neglect, abuse over punishment, the works. Then I finished with my real mother, who passed away when I was 14. Pretend I did as well, because that is when my dad also checked out of my life. Now looking back, I find it in a way funny that I was holding back but they kinda look like fish opening and closing their mouths. My wife then escorted me away. When we got to the car I had my second panic attack. I'm struggling but working through it when my wife notices me zoning. She just hands me our child and things get better. Sorry for the long read. If you're still here, I hope you all have a wonderful day and may your life be blessed.
Am I the a-hole for telling my fiancé's family that he's unemployed after they kept implying that I was a gold digger? So, my fiancé, M33, comes from a well-off family. I, F29, come from a working-class family. My fiancé's family are nice but they can't help throwing comments at me about how I might be a gold digger. For example, if he buys me something they'll go, oh Jason bought you that? You know what this looks like, right? And or wait, Jason paid for this? Only gold diggers make their partners pay for stuff all the time, just saying. It's so demeaning and my fiancé does nothing to stop it. Especially now that he's in a bad place in life after he lost his job. And since he's keeping it secret then, I'm the one paying for everything. This has been going on for 4 months. Last week, his parents invited us for dinner and he insisted that we go so we went. At the dinner table his mom grabbed my hand, literally while I was eating, and looked at my bracelet and went, oh, this bracelet looks really nice, did Jason pay for it? I nodded and reminded her that he bought it for me as a birthday gift last year. She was like, wonder how much it costs. She then leaned back and said, you know, I remember when my brother was dating this gold digger woman, she'd receive expensive stuff like this, pointing at the bracelet here for her birthdays. I was stunned. I cut her off and asked if she meant to say that I was a gold digger. She threw her hands up and went, I mean, if the shoe fits. While laughing awkwardly. Silence took over. I looked at my fiancé and he shook his head at me like, what? I snapped. I told her it was bold of her to imply I was a gold digger when I'm literally providing for her unemployed son, who has been for 4 months now. They all looked shocked. She glanced at me in shock and his dad asked if it was true and my fiancé.
Who is the most infuriating person you have ever met? You know how dumb koalas are? I met this guy at my high school, and he is just like a koala. I was watching him in the canteen, everyone else in the food line was holding a tray. He went up to the dinner lady with bare hands and asked for food. When she asked him where his tray was he looked around and said, my name is Andy. Confused, the dinner lady ignored his strange response and asked him what he wanted and he said burger and fries which were not on the menu, so she offered him something else. He said, no, I only eat burgers and fries, other food is weird. Eventually, he took something else but asked the same dinner lady to bring it to his table. Of course, she laughed and told him to do it himself but he protested and said he was tired from class. He resembled a large potato so this request was hardly a stretch of the imagination. He couldn't be bothered to carry his food, and instead sat and patiently waited. I sat opposite him, fascinated by how slowly he ate his food. It was almost like he was savoring every mouthful. I watched him as he tried to work out how to hold his knife, and I offered to help him but he just gazed at me and eventually said I think I know how to use a knife thanks. He was so irritating. I didn't understand why he was so rude to me. Later in class, he went to write notes and realized he didn't have a pen. There was a stationary desk about 6 feet to his left. He looked over at it, sighed and then turned to me and asked, do you have another pen? I said no. As there was a table full of pens he could use, I told him to go and use one of those instead. He sighed again, visibly annoyed, and slumped off to grab a pen. I also noticed how he kept scratching his crotch, wincing every time he did. My friend Paul had also noticed, leant over to my desk and whispered. I tried to tell him to get that scene too. I think he has the clap. I snorted and asked him how he knew that. Paul replied, you can't hide in the men's urinals. This guy was a mess, but he had so many people around him offered to help or asking if he was okay. Nothing seemed to faze him. I felt like he should be sat in a tree watching the world go by. I have been worrying about my studies, being selected for the athletics team and getting into college. I wonder if he ever worries. Probably not. I heard he is also up for the Ivy League, which blows my mind. Maybe he is a secret genius, and one day I will come into a scene from Good Will Hunting. I envisioned his heroic rise and subversion when I glanced over and watched him chewing on his pen, black ink covering his fingers and the corner of his mouth. He caught my eye and quickly adjusted the pen to the other side of his mouth, and I smiled to myself. Surely, if he was applying for college, then I should be able to get in. After class, Paul caught up with me and told me that Andy's parents went away on vacation last summer, leaving him at home. Apparently, he almost starved to death because he ran out of burgers and was too lazy to make his own food. On those days when I am filled with self-doubt, thinking about Andy sometimes gives me the courage to go on in life. My husband went on a trip with a group of guys and many of them cheated on their wives. I'm forced to keep quiet. My husband went on a trip with a group of men. Many of them are friends of a mutual friend on the trip. He knew 3 of the guys beforehand and met the rest on the trip. They went to a place known for sex tourism. Had my husband not FaceTimed me while some of this stuff was happening, I don't think I'd believe that he was innocent and didn't participate. Most of the men are married with kids and one has a long-term girlfriend. Of the group of men, my husband and one other guy were the only ones who didn't take up the offer of SS workers from their tour and security guy. That term is used loosely as he was also the guy offering them party favors and women. My husband told me on the condition that he does not want something to come out later and he be implicated by association. He felt that I should know what was happening on this trip and he can't risk our relationship. He also said I cannot inform any of the wives and they would know it was him who broke the bro code. They all seem so comfortable cheating on their spouses and he said it didn't seem like it was their first time. Someone we know very closely and wouldn't imagine doing something like this also participated. He ended up cutting the trip short as well as he didn't want to continue hanging out with some of these people. I'm so conflicted and hurt by these people. I will be seeing these wives and girlfriend at events and some of them more frequently. How can I not tell them? I feel as a woman, I would want to be informed. However, my husband said it is not our business as to what their marriages are like. He told me that there is no way their wives don't have an inkling. Before he went to this destination, we looked it up and I mentioned to my husband that because this is what people go there to do, I'm slightly uncomfortable and his assurance was that he would openly communicate with me and let me know everything that happened, which he did. I don't think he expected what happened on this trip either. I just don't know how to respect these people and continue being friends with them as well as not spilling the beans. If I am cold with them or don't interact with them, they will know something is up as I'm usually bubbly and outgoing. The only innocent people are my husband's friend, who is single, and his one other friend who abstained and hung out with my husband. However, it is upsetting that all of these men condoned and basically enabled each other's behavior, my husband included. How do I move forward? I just really don't know. It's making me question if my morals align with my husband, but I also know he is in a very tough spot.
I found my explicit pictures on my brother's computer. About 2 months ago my brother passed away. He was a great older brother who took care of me and it has devastated my family. We have been slowly putting ourselves back together. My mom has finally got to the point where she is comfortable going through his belongings that got sent to us from his flat and she gave me his PC among other bits to take a look at and see if I could do anything with it. I know a fair bit about computers so I thought I would set it up to see what still worked. It booted up fine and to my surprise he didn't have a password on it. He lived on his own so I guess he never needed to keep anyone out. Out of a sort of morbid curiosity I opened the browser. I thought I could maybe see some of the last things he was looking at towards the end and I saw a link to his Google Photos in his favorites bar. I thought this was an amazing chance to get back some of the photos we might have never seen, get some photos of his friends and adventures he'd been on over the years. On the side I saw his albums and one of them had my name on it. In this album was an insurmountable amount of pictures of me. He had videos of me going to town on myself from what looked like a secret nanny cam planted in my room, a lot of screenshots of my gym pictures as well as many photos of me fully unclothed. These photos range from when I was a kid to later teen years. I didn't go through it for long but it was a massive amount. I have no idea how he got hold of them or why the hell he'd been collecting them. I'm a mix of disgusted and devastated and I just don't know how to move on from it. I keep feeling a need to go back and look how far back this collection goes but I know I shouldn't. Update, my wife and her best friend accused me of having an affair, then got angry when I didn't have one. That night I approached my wife and told her that I was going to find a therapist. I didn't connect it to her accusations or anything. Just said that I was having a tough time and needed therapy. She shrugged and told me to do whatever. Next day, I got home from work and our room and my home office were ripped apart. Things everywhere, important papers scattered. I don't see her but our daughter's in her room crying. My wife left her alone, her cell phone's off. I call my in-laws and a few friends, but no one's seen her. I'm starting to get worried and I call my mom to see if she can babysit while I go out and look for her. Before my mom can get home, my wife gets back. Jesse's driving. Jessie doesn't come in. She hasn't been back in the house since I kicked her out because she was offended by my behavior, but my wife does. She's clearly upset, Been crying. I ask what happened. I thought at first the house might have been robbed. She starts screaming at me that I'm being unfaithful and that the therapy is a front so I can meet my mistress. I try to calm her down and tell her that's not true, but she came at me and she hit me. My nose is broken. She kind of realized what she did and sat down on the couch and went comatose, just stared at the wall. I went into my daughter's room and locked the door. Called my mom to tell her what happened. She was already on her way, and my mother-in-law to ask her to come over and take care of my wife. I packed a bag for my daughter and when my mom got there, we left. My wife didn't even look up. We dropped my daughter off with my dad and then went to urgent care for my nose. I got blood all over my mom's new Subaru. My daughter and I are staying with my parents for a while and my wife's staying with hers. I am looking into getting a restraining order against Jessie. My wife and I are separating. I love her but I won't live with someone who hurts me and who could potentially hurt our daughter. I am not going forward with a divorce yet, with the hopes that my wife will get the treatment she needs and we can work things out. My in-laws told me that they're looking at inpatient treatment at a local hospital, but I also have everything well documented in case of an eventual custody battle. My heart's broken because I know this isn't my wife, this is a sickness in her mind, but I need to keep myself and our daughter safe and give her the space to recover. I'm hoping that this is the right decision. My wife forces me to fill her up and I'm really worried. I, 28, male, and my wife Fiona, 25, female, have been together for quite a while and already have 2 children. For me, 2 children is more than enough. Quite frankly, I would have liked to have no children, but that ship has sailed and I can't do anything about that now. My only solace is that I have resolved to myself that I don't want to have any more children going forward. I've tried to have this conversation with Fiona, I swear it, I have tried. But every time I try to bring up the subject of children and how I don't want more, Fiona seems to get really agitated and upset. She tells me that she wants a large family with a lot of children and that she's always wanted that, and that I knew that when I married her, so I should have been prepared for that. And she's not wrong. I used to think I wanted a few children too, but I realize now that it was just culture and society telling me that that was my life's purpose and that I'd find joy and meaning in marriage and children. Which was a bald-faced lie. She also seems fixated on this idea that children are a blessing from God and that if God wants us to have more children, then we will have more and that will be that. I know that she has a good heart. And maybe I'm in the wrong for being so selfish and not wanting more children, but I just cannot and do not want more. Recently, I've been choosing to limit lovemaking. Whenever I think Fiona might be close to her period, she doesn't tell me until after it starts. I'm also trying to reduce intimacy in general, unless we use protection, but she gets upset if I want to use it. She says that using it is not trusting the Lord. So I'm forced to either shut the whole night down or cave in and give her what she wants. I'm concerned that if we have another child, that is going to damage me, our marriage, and my relationship with the current 2 children. I once saw a box of you-know-what in the trash when I took it out. That I had purchased specifically for intimate protection. And I sneakily rescued it and put the individually wrapped units back in the nightstand. I can't believe she would just do something like that. Normally she's good with communication, but maybe this is a sore spot for her. I confronted her about it, and she told me that I should never have bought them in the first place because we don't need them. I just feel trapped. I can't get a vasectomy either, because that also seems to be a gross violation of Fiona's religious views. I can't leave her because if I do, I'll be forced to pay out child support and I'll lose my good standing among all my friends and the broader community. And possibly even lose my job. I'm employed within a culture that frowns very heavily on divorce. I have healthy coping mechanisms in place, but over time, this stuff is just beginning to bother me. And I really don't want to have a 3rd child. I'm not prepared for this. Is my boyfriend trying to sabotage my grades or am I being paranoid? I swear I'm not in the wrong. I am doing my master's in data science and it is a really hard subject for me. I will say I'm very studious and always strive to get good grades. If I do well in master's I will get a scholarship on my PhD. But lately something has been happening that has made me suspicious of my boyfriend, Liam, 26. We have been dating for 5 years now. We met in college. Liam has no interest in higher studies and wants to do business but he knows how important my studies are for me. So, it started happening almost a few months ago. It was my midterms and I am always on time. But that day I woke up 15 minutes late. I swear I did put the alarm right. I never miss it. But on that day I missed it. Luckily there was no harm done. But then again I lost the report I was doing. I got a lot of poop because of that from my supervisor. I thought maybe I misplaced it. I found it inside the nightstand on Liam's side. When I asked about it he made an excuse that I must have kept it. The thing is I never touch his side of the nightstand unless I am cleaning. Then one time Liam arranged a family dinner right before an important presentation of mine. He knew not to disturb me during any of those exams and crucial times. I was angry with him. He told me I am being selfish by only thinking about my grades in school and never focus on him. This is almost like a pattern. He would always have some big things planned before my quizzes and exams or project presentations. I remember in one instance where I wrote a code in my computer and saved it, only for it to have bugs, and as I was fixing it, I can tell someone deliberately tampered with my code. I know Liam sometimes borrows my computer because his one is old and mine has better performance. What happened last night confirmed my suspicion. There was a report I have been working on for 6 months. This is basically a journal I have been working on. Today I had to show the first draft of it to my supervisor. I usually keep my computer open before I go to sleep. It locks automatically. Late at night when I woke up I saw Liam was doing something on my computer. I asked him what he was doing on my computer. His response was I was looking at porn. That was stupid and lame. And guess what? My entire report was deleted and even the backup ones I had on my Google Drive was deleted. Luckily I saved it on cloud and pen drive too. But I am still feeling like he did it intentionally. I don't understand why he would do that. I did confront him, but it only made him angry, saying I am accusing him without any proof and that since I live under his roof he should be allowed to use my stuff too. I am concerned whether I am being paranoid and sabotaging my relationship, or is he trying to sabotage my grades?
I abandoned 2 intoxicated girls alone at night. Now my boyfriend's pissed. My boyfriend's best friend's girlfriend is always really rude to me. She wanted to match up my boyfriend with one of her friends, so when I arrived into the picture, she decided she hated my guts for ruining her friend's chance for a great relationship. I was still trying to be nice if we had to hang out because of our boyfriends, but I preferred to avoid her since she would always make a point to talk crap about my appearance/personality/fashion sense/work/etc. My boyfriend and his friend went to a festival together. I was supposed to pick them up after because they were drinking. I arrived at the parking lot at 3 a.m. to see my boyfriend, his friend's girlfriend, and her friend, yes, the one she wanted to hook up with my boyfriend. I was surprised, but before I could ask about it they got into a car. A few minutes passed until the girlfriend's friend asked if I was the B word that stole her love, which spiraled into them going into a rant about everything that is wrong with me in their eyes, including how my boyfriend could do better. I told them that they are quite brave, considering the state they are in, completely wasted, since I'm driving them home and I can decide to just drop them off if they continue. They dared me to do so. So I did. Pulled up to the nearest bus stop, told them to get out. They thought I was joking until they saw me turning off the engine. In the end my boyfriend got annoyed, since he wasn't feeling well and wanted to go home, so he screamed at them to get out or he would drag them out of my car himself. His best friend tried to protest, but my boyfriend in his intoxicated state told him that it's my car, so he's not one to decide, and if he has a problem then he waits for the bus with his girl and her friend or takes an Uber. My boyfriend, after waking up sober and remembering what happened, called me an asshole for kicking out 2 intoxicated girls out of my car in the middle of the night. I reminded him that his friend stayed with them, but it only angered him more for some reason. I was told that the girls were intoxicated, so I shouldn't take to heart what they were saying and that by dropping them off at the bus stop I put them in unnecessary danger. He is going on about it for the past few hours, to the point when I don't know if I really did the bad thing and should apologize.
What is it about Taylor Swift that has people so obsessed with her and everything she does? Taylor Swift has been around since 2006 and to this day is still releasing music. Most of it has to do with nostalgia. Many fans have grown up with her, and with each album she's made, she has corresponded to chapters of our lives. Her music is very relatable because she writes about relationships, love, heartbreaks, growing up, lack of equality, friendships, and more. Because we've all been through those things, people find comfort in her music. Venturing more into her music, she's very versatile when it comes to genres. Her first albums were country, then she expanded to pop, then indie folk. She even mixed some punk pop and rock influences here and there. Realistically, she has a little something for everyone, so even if you only listen to one of Taylor Swift's songs, you're still listening to her. There's a little of everything for everyone from Taylor. Fans also tend to love her storytelling. Many songs I've listened to don't have an actual plot line like hers do. For instance, her album Folklore consists of songs detailing a relationship between Betty, James, and August. While the storyline is clear, there's still so much to speculate about this love triangle relationship Taylor Swift created, which gets fans hooked on her even more because in order to understand that plot, you have to do a deep dive and analysis into her songs. Personally, when I found this out, I did tons of research on it because I was so intrigued by it. In the end, Folklore became my favorite album because of its creative story. Now, Taylor Swift has released 3 new albums and 3 re-recorded albums with new songs in just 3 years. She's re-recording her old albums after her masters were sold to regain ownership of her work, which not only breathes fresh life into old work, but also sends a powerful statement about creative control for artists. This also allows some of her newer fans to become fans of her old work, as well as bringing back old fans who might have stopped listening once she switched genres. Not only that, but she releases songs from the vault, as she calls it, which are unheard songs by the fans. It feels like a sweet treat to give to people that get them captivated even more by her music. Fans think she's a brilliant writer and many of her songs have been hits. Even if you don't like Taylor Swift or think she's overrated, you can't deny she's an excellent businesswoman, knows how to work a crowd, is currently touring and has the highest selling tour ever, has her fans wrapped around her finger, and makes good music for all to enjoy. You can't discredit her for all of that because of a personal opinion.
Police officers of Reddit, who's the smartest criminal you've ever encountered? I heard about one person that pulled a shoplifting scam on a large, popular and well-known US retail store. They walked in with some cheap nylon product to get one of those I walked in with his stickers they used to put on returning merchandise. The sticker easily peeled off the product undamaged. They walked to the electronics department, grabbed an expensive box off a shelf and went to customer service. They placed the sticker on the big box and asked if they could return the item without a receipt. Unfortunately, no. Not without the original receipt. Dang it, and they walk out. Customer service even gave the doorman a thumbs up, having just interacted with the customer. This took place before widespread inventory controls and cameras absolutely everywhere. My favorite was the guy who stole a post office mailbox off the street, repainted it, and then put it next to the night deposit box at a bank. and hung an out of order sign on the deposit box. All the businesses came along and dropped off their deposits in the mailbox.
Get ready with me to go celebrate a failed wedding where the groom dodged the biggest bullet of his life. Claire and Mark were supposed to get married, but poop hit the fan when Claire messaged Sally the meanest thing you could say to a person. Sally is a girl we all adore. If anyone ever wronged her, we would all run to her rescue, no questions asked. This time was no different. Prior to the conversation with Sally and Claire, Sally had confessed to her closest friends that she had a miscarriage. We were all devastated as everyone was excited to see her bundle of joy, but we were told to keep things under wrap because it had just happened and she didn't want everyone and their mom to know. Problem was, everyone knew that Sally was pregnant since she had posted it everywhere online. So when Claire's wedding was approaching fast, she took the liberty of texting Sally that it would be best if she didn't come to the wedding at all. She went on to explain that she thought Sally would be over the death of her child by now. Her final straw was Sally full-on sobbing when she saw a mother playing in the park with her young daughter while she was out shopping with Claire. And Claire just digs herself a deeper hole. She said, "People don't know yet because apparently you aren't ready to tell people. I think if you don't tell people you shouldn't come. Everyone at the wedding will be asking why you aren't pregnant and I don't want my guests distracted from making me feel special. Like maybe you could announce it on Facebook now so people know." Sally just loses it. She rips her a new one, telling her that if this is how she feels, she will not attend the wedding, says their friendship is over, and calls her giant trash pile of human. Claire gets insulted and tries playing the victim, saying Sally is twisting her words. Yeah, right. Claire just kept repeating that her wedding should only be about her, so she doesn't want people asking Sally about her pregnancy. Is that so? Bad? Yes. Sally takes it upon herself to message Mark saying that his lovely wife just uninvited her from the wedding. Mark asks her to explain why that is, so Sally sends a screenshot of the entire conversation. Mark read the message and never got back to Sally. A couple of hours later, Claire messages Sally again. She said, "Why the hell did you send Mark our conversation? He's sympathizing with you now. I just want my wedding to be all about me. It's my special day." Sally's had enough, so she blocks her. Eventually, Mark got back to Sally and apologized for Claire's behavior and told her he called off the wedding because Claire was an awful human being. Mark said he knew how hard her miscarriage was for her and Claire was being incredibly selfish by asking her to go public with such sensitive information. Mark even made a public announcement that the wedding was off, which made Claire angrier by the minute. Mark then made a group chat with all the guests on his side and said that he didn't want all the wedding planning to go to waste, so he still wanted to celebrate with everybody. Everyone already paid for their clothing and bought gifts, so why not? Who can turn down a party anyway? Now, Sally and Mark weren't public with the real reason Mark had called off the wedding, but they didn't need to be. All Mark said was that Claire was being really mean to Sally and everyone was quick to take her side. So, Claire lost her fiancé and all her friends in less than 2 days. As far as I know, nobody told Claire the new plans, so we have to hope she doesn't crash her own wedding.
My dad kept his no questions asked, just call me for help promise. My 13 female dad is a good dude. He's not perfect. He'll get pissed over smaller things sometimes that I think aren't worth the trouble. He gets a bit too drunk with his coworkers occasionally and gets banished from my parents' bedroom. All in all though, good dad. One thing that I've been told again and again since I was in elementary school is that if I'm ever in real trouble, he will always be there to help. I've never had to take him up on his promise until I was invited to a party a few weeks ago. Told my parents I was sleeping over at a friend's place. There were some older guys at the party and hard liquor. My friends and I will sneak the occasional beer, but it was our first time trying things like vodka and whiskey. We got really drunk and the high schoolers were being creepy. My friends really didn't want to call their parents, kinda understandable because we were wasted at a party with boys we didn't know that well. I ended up calling my dad at like 3 a.m. He just asked for the address and immediately drove over, dropped off my 2 friends, and then we drove home. Honestly, I thought I was in for the shout session of a lifetime. Low-key I knew I deserved it. All he did, though, was hold my hand and tell me that the world can be a dangerous place and to please make safe, smart decisions. Next morning, he acts as if nothing has happened. Apparently my dad just told my mom that I was feeling a bit sick and came home during the night, which was true because my hangover was horrible. My dad, this guy.
What are some unethical life hacks? Give fake money to homeless people. They will thank you for it, but also when they get arrested and taken to jail, it'll reduce the number of homeless people in your area. If you're stuck on an annoying call, put your phone on airplane mode instead of just hanging up. The other person will see call failed instead of call ended. Save business cards of people you don't like. If you ever hit a parked car accidentally, just write sorry on the back and leave it on the windshield. Buy the cheapest tickets available for a sporting event. Once inside, check Ticketmaster and StubHub for better seats that didn't sell and go sit there. Look up your building's washer/dryer model on eBay and order a key for it. I haven't paid for laundry in years and it cost me $8. Sleep like a baby knowing you're not paying for on-site laundry. If the person sitting in front of you on a flight reclines their seat all the way back and leaves you with no room, turn on the air con above you to full blast and point it at the top of their head. In your last year of college, lose your student ID and get a new one. The exp date will reset and you can get another 4 years of discounts. If you're initiating a divorce, secretly arrange consultations with all the best divorce attorneys in your area before choosing one and filing. Once they have met with you, even briefly, they are considered biased and will have to recuse themselves from representing your spouse. If you need to lie about something, include an embarrassing unnecessary detail. After all, why would you intentionally lie to make yourself look bad? If a relative keeps asking you about having kids, lie that the wife is pregnant. A few months later, tell them there was a miscarriage so they'll feel uncomfortable bringing up the subject again. If you have a significant unexplained employment gap that is hurting your resume, claim that you were providing full-time end-of-life care for a grandparent or other older relative. If you decide to adopt kids, tell them that if anyone makes fun of them for being adopted, they should say at least I was wanted. You were probably a mistake and your parents didn't have the heart to tell you. Make your edibles in the shape of dog treats and take them anywhere you want. If a drug dog finds them, his handler will just think he's being a silly boy. If you plan on going to prison, learn to cut hair. Barbers are greatly appreciated by other inmates and you'll likely be spared when it comes to prison violence. When I don't want to get caught plagiarizing off of Wikipedia, I translate the article to French, then Hindi, then back to English and chip off grammatical errors and get praised for my hard work. If you're driving next to a cop with drugs in your car and are trying to act normal, pick your nose. Your body language shows you aren't concerned with anyone around you. The last thing you'd ever do if you were paranoid about a cop next to you is pick your nose. Having an affair? Change your lover's contact name in your phone to Scam Likely, so your primary partner won't question why you're getting so many calls. When you give someone a gift card as a gift, write down the card number and code. Then after a year or two, check the balance, and if they hadn't used it yet, just use it yourself. They obviously won't know or care. Learn how to read Braille and create a cheat/answer sheet for a test and put it in your hoodie pocket. You can feel the answers with your fingers without looking away from your test. If you ever get caught sleeping at your desk at work, then say they told me at the blood bank that this would happen when asked for a reason. If you glue a dead wasp to the palm of your hand, you can hit your boss on the back of the head as hard as you like and act like you saved him. If you come across a dating profile begging for money, send them a request for the same amount instead of a gift. Many times they're too careless to read and will automatically accept it because they assume another desperate guy is sending cash. If you live near a US military base, it's a really good time to install Tinder. Military girlfriends/wives are freaking as F. And their spouses are about to be deployed for at least a year. Start making those inroads now. Don't want to do homework study guides? Ask a classmate to split the work and that you will do the first half, then ask a different classmate and say the same thing but you will do the bottom half. Wait for them to give you their parts and put them together.
My awful best friend slept with my older brother and ditched me on my birthday. She lied to her entire family about what happened and they won't leave me alone. My best friend and I have known each other for 7 years and I never realized how bad of a friend she was until now. There have been little things in the past though, like her always forgetting her wallet when we go places. Meaning I was always paying for her food, drinks, store purchases, etc. She would always say she would pay me back but never did. It was partly my fault because I would just let it slide since she had everything handed to her by her parents and has never had to work for anything. She would constantly talk crap about her friends and family but acted friendly to their faces, which made me think she was doing the same thing to me with them. There was always drama with her throughout high school because of this, and she lost some friends because of it. At the time, I didn't really care because she was my only friend and I didn't want to be alone. Everything fell apart a week ago when I found out she had been sleeping with my brother behind my back, while she was hanging out with me. I live with my brother in his own house, and she has been coming over on my days off from work to hang out, which was normal. But something kept happening every time she came over. Whenever I was ready for bed, they would start watching a movie. I didn't want to leave her alone with my weird brother, her words, so I would try to stay up as late as I could. Eventually, I would just go to bed and they would both play it off by saying, "Oh no. You're going to bed already, the movie isn't even over," as if to make me think they wanted me to stay. Even though the entire time, I was blocking them, and I know they were annoyed at that. I found out the last time she came over to hang out with me. I went to the bathroom at 2 a.m. and noticed she still wasn't in bed, so I just assumed they were still watching a movie. But I found the most disgusting thing ever. My best friend was making out with my brother. I was furious, but I couldn't confront them just yet. It would have been too weird for me. I just left the next morning without saying anything to them, and went to talk to her other friends to see if they knew. Turns out, this had been going on for a few weeks at this point, and every time she came over, it was just to hang out with him. The thing that irks me most about this whole situation is that she left her ex a month ago and I've asked her if she liked my brother before. She straight up told me that she would never in her life do anything with him, finds him gross, and he's like an older brother. To me, she was just using him as a rebound, and my brother didn't see that because he hadn't been with anyone for over a year. I confronted them that day and they gave me some BS like, "We weren't ready to tell you. We didn't know how you'd react. I'm happy, so you should be happy for me." I told them both that I was not comfortable with this, though at the end of the day, they are grown adults and can date whoever they want. This doesn't mean I have to like the relationship. They were gone that whole day and showed up the next afternoon with a dog that they wanted me to watch so they could go on a date. I wasn't asked, I was told. After that, she stopped hanging out with me but would continue to come over and be with him. It was clear they didn't want me around since I would walk right past them without so much as a hi being thrown my way. She stopped texting and calling altogether. I just let them be and went off to do my own thing, then was called selfish for not including them as I would before. Even though they did that to me first, and the last thing I wanted was to be their third wheel. Their relationship only lasted a month before they both met new people. She reached out to hang out once in a while, saying that I could no longer avoid her since she wasn't dating my brother, But every hangout got cut short because I didn't feel comfortable around her anymore, so our conversations were short and awkward. She felt like a stranger to me. A couple months later, I started planning for my birthday party. The plan was to go to the bar and basically drink all night since I was the last one of my friend group to be able to drink. My best friend had her way back when I was still 20, but she told me that I had to attend her party no matter what, and it didn't matter that I was the only one there who couldn't drink. I was basically alone that whole night since she was still dating my brother and everyone else was too wasted to talk. Since her new boyfriend wasn't old enough to drink, I didn't invite him to the bar, but I let her know he could still come as long as he doesn't try to drink. She decided to wait a day before my birthday to complain about this. She messaged me saying I was being selfish by making plans for my birthday that wasn't inclusive for everyone to attend. She told me that if I wanted her to go then she wasn't getting dressed, basically staying in her PJs, and she wasn't going to pay for anything, which is totally in character for her since she always forgets her wallet. I finally spoke up saying we had already decided and planned for this, so if she had an issue with it then she didn't have to go. I also brought up how she did the same to me for her birthday, but I didn't complain to her because it was her day and I didn't want to ruin that. The next day, my friends didn't show up to the bar and it was just me, my boyfriend, brother, and his girlfriend. The whole thing was a letdown, and my friends all reassured me they were going to the party the day before, so that made me feel even worse. I messaged her asking if she really wasn't coming, and she acted like I was asking the world of her. It was such a burden and she complained all the way through. In the end, I told her not to worry about coming. A month later, we hadn't spoken since my birthday, but found out she and my friends ditched my party to throw their own. I wanted to ask her why she had done that, but I actually received a message from her mom telling me to apologize to her daughter for being selfish and not including her in my birthday plans. I told her I tried my hardest to get her there. I even offered to pay for a few drinks for her on my birthday. I sent screenshots of the conversation as well, but she went on about me being rude, inconsiderate and a terrible friend for making her feel unwanted as a friend. According to her, it was a waste of a friendship if I didn't grow up and be the bigger person. I keep getting messages from her friends/family saying what a terrible person I am for leaving her out of plans and that I still need to apologize. I feel like this wasn't in my fault and I didn't do anything wrong. Not only did she sleep with my brother but she also ditched me on my birthday.
The woman at CVS knew I was cutting myself. Tonight was a bad night and I cut myself a lot myself tonight. I have work tomorrow morning and I knew I had to cover it up, so I went to my 24-hour CVS to get some gauze to cover it up. I see the cashier at night often and I usually get cat food for my kitten at late hours because I work late. Tonight was a bad night and things were hard for me, so I dipped into some old habits and I cut myself really badly. I went to that CVS and got some stuff to cover it up and she and I exchanged our usual pleasantries until she saw what I was buying. She looked and asked if I was okay and I said I was. She clearly saw all the marks that were perfectly horizontal and asked if it was a mark from my cat. I said yes and she said I know cats can be rough but I hope you have someone you can talk to about that to help with the marks. I know she knows that I hurt myself, but it was so nice of her to care for me even when I don't deserve it. So shout out to the wonderful woman at CVS at 1 a.m. for not making me feel more shame. Ex-bullies of Reddit, what was your turning point? We picked on this boy in grades 4 to 5, who was a little different. We would say he smelt and such. Even made a game called Stinky Boy where we all ran away from him. The teacher made me sit with him for the year and I mocked him constantly. One day he invited me to his birthday. I was confused but still went. Turns out he thought I was his best friend and gave me one of 5 special sleepover invitations. He invited all of my friend group at the time, all of which made fun of him. I was the only kid out of our class of 30 he had invited to show up to this poor kid's birthday. He was so happy to see me. We played games all night and I had so much fun with him. Turns out the reason we thought he was smelly was because he had to wear the same pair of old clothes because his single father couldn't afford much else. Did I mention that his dad said to me that he had heard so much about me and how his son was so happy to have a friend like me? He even called my parents to tell them how happy he was that his son had finally found a friend. I hung out with him every snack time after that. Now in my final year of school I be sure to ask him what's up when I see him in the school as we grew apart and he finally found friends after I introduced him to some people. Looking back it makes me sad that kids can be so cruel. My husband accused me for embarrassing him in front of his mother, so I pointed out his bad spending habits. This past year has been really hard on my husband. He hates his job, is having a difficult time trying to see his son, and a lot of debt has stacked up for him, reckless spending trying to make him feel better. We recently started to combine financials as well as having separate ones. This was done so I could manage our money and pull us out of debt again. This has been working great till the other night. My husband and I were at my mom's for dinner and as when started to pack up to leave he asked if we could get Dairy Queen. I asked him if he had money for Dairy Queen. I will add the only reason I asked is because each time we get paid we both take out spending money. On this pay cycle, he took $200 and I took $40. Well, he didn't have money for ice cream and I didn't want to spend the household money because it was going to dip into bills. My mom gave us $10 and we went on our way. In the car he decided he didn't want ice cream and we ended up getting popsicles at the store later. I thought all was good till last night. He stated that I not only embarrassed him in front of my mom but that I was being financially abusive and he would no longer let me handle the money and I would have to give him an itemized list of bills if I wanted money to pay them. I apologized for embarrassing him and said my intention was not to abuse him but to help him think about his spending habits. I pointed out he took $200 for spending money and I had $40. I still have $32 and he already went through $200. He said most of that went to paying people back for money he had borrowed so it doesn't count. We still haven't come to a new plan on how to handle money and I'm thinking about staying at my mom's tonight so he has time to think. I hope he is just overwhelmed with life and not realizing he is upset in general. So, am I the a-hole for asking my husband if he had money for ice cream? Have you ever seen an employee get fired on the spot because of you? Many years ago I took my 2 children on vacation in Florida. It was their first vacation. My kids were 6 and 8. We stopped in a restaurant that was very much like the Ryan's restaurants. It was buffet or order an entree. I ordered an entree and I believe my kids got an entrees as well. Our waiter was super nice and while we were waiting on our meals my daughter the youngest asked if she could look at the dessert bar. She just wanted to see what the options were for after dinner. We went up to the dessert bar and she eyed the choices. She said she wanted a cookie for later and I said okay, which one? My daughter said, are those chocolate chip cookies or raisins? She pointed at them. The bakery employee came up and before I could ask which one was the chocolate chip cookie she slapped my daughter's hand. She angrily informed me that she needed tongs to get the cookie. I was in shock by what just happened. I told the lady we only had a question and we were not ready for dessert. She scowled at me. I gave her a death stare and we went back to the table. Our food came out but I didn't eat any. The waiter came back and asked if everything was okay. I said to him no it wasn't and I told him what the bakery employee did. He gasped and got his manager. I relayed the story to the manager and he was very apologetic about it and said he would handle rude employee. A few minutes later I saw a rude employee going up front. She gathered her purse and walked out the door. The manager came back and refunded our meals and said we could choose anything else on the menu to take home. He said bakery lady no longer works for them. We chose some entrees and went back to the bakery bar. Another lady was there and she was very pleasant. I asked her about the cookie and she pointed to the chocolate chip one. My daughter picked up the tongs to get her cookie as she already knew to do this. The bakery lady then put out signs identifying what the cookies were. Apparently the other lady had forgot to do this. Our waiter took great care of us and the refund I about $20 received from our meal I gave it to him as a tip. What do you wish you knew before starting a harmful habit, like smoking? What the F do I wish I knew before starting to smoke? After almost a decade of smoking, it's easy to look back and realize how much of a effing mistake it was. It all started out of curiosity, wanting to fit in with my friends, but after a while, it just became an everyday thing. And then when my best friend left for college and stopped splitting the cost of packs with me, I saw that as an opportunity to quit cold turkey. The first few days were hell, dizziness, headaches and irritability like you wouldn't believe. But once those 3 days passed, I felt like a new person, free from this shitty habit that had been weighing me down for so long. My lungs felt clearer than ever before and the smell that had been clinging to my clothes was gone too. Stepping outside for the first time after quitting was effing amazing, suddenly aware of scents that had faded into the background before. A month later my lungs felt even better than right after quitting, stronger and breathing became easier too. After a year without smoking there wasn't even an ounce of desire in me to go back, not even if someone offered me one today. Nowadays I understand how important our health is compared to wasting money on something so pointless like cigarettes were for me. Smoking was nothing but a costly distraction that should have been avoided from day one. Something I wish I'd known sooner.
I've accidentally been dating my own father. Freud would love me. So I've never met my dad. He ran off when my mom found out she was pregnant with me. My brother was only 8 months old at the time, so he also has no memory of him. There are no pictures of him anywhere and my mom hates talking about him. All I know is that he was emotionally abusive to her and a real jerk. I have a thing for older men. Call it daddy issues or a fetish or whatever you want, but I pretty much only date or sleep with men 40 and up. My family doesn't know this or that I'm gay for that matter. It wouldn't be an issue, they just never ask. We don't really share personal things like that. About 6 months ago I met David at a club. We hit it off great. He's in great shape for his age, supposedly 43, although that's a lie. He's actually 47 as I found out, really attractive, charming, etc. He left for a 2-week work trip a few days after we met, but we kept messaging each other and I really liked him, which is rare for me. We went on a date after he came back and have pretty much been dating ever since. He has a lot of money and I'm kind of his sugar baby, but that's not the reason I was attracted to him, definitely A+ though. I didn't tell anyone we were dating except for 2 of my best friends. He also never met any of my friends or family and I never met him. This changed last night. We were at a restaurant when out of the corner of my eye I spotted my mom. I don't live at home and we only usually text if we need something, so I didn't know she'd be there, and TBH I still don't know why she was. She hates going out and thinks it's a waste of money. She had not seen us yet, but David noticed me looking at her. I'll forever remember the way his face changed when he saw her. His expression went from his casual, charming smile he always had to this blank, panicked look. I obviously noticed and got a really bad feeling, so I asked him what's wrong and he just got up and excused himself. I kept asking him where he was going and grabbed him so he couldn't just leave. At this point I was really confused and suspicious, but I would have never guessed what would happen next. I don't think anything could ever prepare me for it. At some point while he was getting up, my mother must have spotted us, because next thing I know she's next to our table, asking me what was going on. I couldn't really pinpoint her facial expression because it looked like she was horrified, but again, at this point I didn't know David was my father and she doesn't know I'm gay. David is visibly uncomfortable and looks like he wants to die. He was literally sweating. I assumed this was because he didn't want my mother to know I was dating someone of his age. I was about to try to explain what was going on to my mom when she said, "Why would you go behind my back like this?" I was so confused, because again, I didn't know he was my dad, so like what was she going on about? She probably assumed I had looked for and met up with my father without talking to her about it, despite her telling us how badly he treated her. To me, however, it seemed like she was acting crazy for no reason. I kind of took it personally and thought she was trying to tell me who to date and what to do, so I casually told her that I was just on a date with my boyfriend, and I tried to grab David's hand, but he just jumped up and ran away. He literally bolted like an Olympic runner. I cannot get the image out of my head of him jumping between waiters to get away. Everyone was staring at us by this point. It was so embarrassing and I was mortified. My mom looked like she was frozen in place. I was more confused than ever. I had no idea what was happening. I had assumed she had asked me that because she didn't want me to be gay, which made no sense. She is very open and liberal, or dated older men, which made a bit more sense but was still none of her business. But her expression just made my skin crawl. It's like I could feel the horror she must have been experiencing. She just told me to get up and come with her. I was still confused, but something in her body language told me to just do as I was told. I quickly paid for our drinks and appetizers. Thank God the main course hadn't been served yet. BC damn, was that expensive. My mom excused herself to her friends, and once we were in her car outside, we just sat there in silence for what felt like at least 10 minutes. I didn't really dare to say anything. I was still processing that my boyfriend just ran away from me and my mother. I had also tried to text him, but he wasn't responding. Shocker, I know. When my mom spoke, it sounded like she had been pew-pewed. She sounded so wounded. I think it might haunt me forever. She asked me who that man was and I explained to her, and I went on about how much I loved him because again, I was still thinking of David as my boyfriend and assumed my mom's reaction was because of his age or gender. I cannot believe that I went on about how much I romantically loved my dad right to my mother's face. It makes me want to puke. Long story short, she told me he was my father and that she instantly recognized him. That talk was the most traumatic experience of my life. We both started crying at some point and just wept for a while in the car. I was howling. It was primal. I'm not usually emotional or prone to crying, so it was really shocking to me just how much pain a person can feel. Most of it is just a blur now, especially compared to how clearly I remember every other moment of the evening up to this. We drove home. I slept in my old bedroom. We haven't talked about it since, but my brother is also staying at our place still. He's a med student, never moved out because of housing costs, and he knows something's up. Tried talking to me about it and I just broke down again. How do I ever tell anyone about this? The worst part is I think despite all of this I still love David. I tried messaging David, but I just don't know what to say. The last message I sent him literally just says, "Please call me, I love you," sent right after he ran away. Like what the hell? What the actual hell? Like, how do I come back from this? How do I ever look my mom in the eye again? I haven't left my room yet and I'm in tears again while writing this. I can't even remember the last time I cried before yesterday, and now I've been doing it nonstop.
Parents with a disabled child, do you ever regret having children? I regret having my 9-year-old with autism and oppositional defiance disorder every single day. She is very verbal and can be as sweet as a peach when she gets her way, but doing the hard work of parenting her correctly has been a nightmare. She was an unwanted pregnancy when I was a dumb 20-year-old. I was in a lot of psych meds before I realized I was pregnant that I think messed her brain up. I had taken Plan B perfectly like on the instructions the one time I had unprotected intimacy. I figured that would have been the end of that worry. I didn't realize I was pregnant until she was about 10 weeks gestation and immediately stopped taking my meds but, alas, by the time I could get the money together for an abortion, the closest Planned Parenthood was a 7-hour drive so no go there, the pregnancy was too far along. I wish I would have looked into adoption now. Bio dad has never been in the picture and the first 5 years were pretty rough but manageable since I had family help and a super supportive husband. Once she started kindergarten she was getting suspended from school constantly for stupid things like throwing an empty water bottle at the principal or hitting her teacher. Her IEP was essentially worthless and I couldn't hold down a job or go to school because I had no one to watch her every single week. At random times I'd get called to take her home for 2 to 3 days at a time. So I did what I thought was best and we packed up and moved out of state with her to a much more supportive area with better schools. We have been here for 3 years and it's been hell. Her professional support, school, in-home therapist, the community have all been outstanding but I have no support for myself besides my husband and we are moving back to our home state in 3 weeks because I'm becoming too ill myself from all of this. She bites, kicks, screams, runs away into traffic, calls us grotesque names when she doesn't get her way. Wednesday I had to call the police because she refused to get into the car when it was time to go home and when I was finally able to literally drag her kicking, screaming into the car and close it she tried to bust the window open. She took an ambulance ride to the hospital and was a little angel for them when she calmed down and they said she wasn't a threat and sent her home. I am very bitter and resentful. I've done everything I can for her to give her a good life. She has in-home specialists come to teach her coping skills 5 hours every week. She is in one of the best school districts in state. I pay for acting and swimming classes for her but when I sit down and have to discipline her or make her do her homework, I get verbally and physically abused and there's only so much one person can take when you give and get nothing in return. I feel guilty because her baby brother is neurotypical and we have a very strong bond and I love him more but I am becoming more apathetic every day to my toxic feelings towards my daughter. I hope that when we move back home that she gets arrested and ends up in juvenile detention so she can see how good she has it at home with me. Maybe then I'll get a break from her. My wife is scissoring her best friend while gaslighting me. Me and my wife Bianca have been together for 6 years. Our relationship was perfect. We share similar interests in sports cars and fitness. We both have good paying jobs. We both admitted that we're each other's best intimate partner or so I thought. Things moved pretty fast with us. Moved in 4 months of dating, engaged 7 months of dating and married on our 1-year anniversary. Everything changed when we were ready to try for children. Bianca had a very rough pregnancy as she was pregnant with twins. 1 boy and 1 girl. The kids came out prematurely but healthy for the most part. After the kids were born we focused a lot of time on them and after we were allowed to have intimacy again we tried but Bianca wasn't really herself and had a hard time feeling aroused. I thought it was just the baby blues. I never pushed the issue though because Bianca doesn't mind me pleasing myself. After 3 months Bianca went back to her office job and since she's a mother and a great worker her boss let her do hybrid remote work. A month back into working Bianca would constantly text me that she had to stay extra to catch up on work and then a few weeks later she randomly stopped working remotely. Bianca started spending a lot of time with her co-worker Vivian. I met Vivian before, she was at our baby shower and has come to the house a few times. My wife would take her Saturdays she had off to go to bars with Vivian. Vivian is single and my wife's excuse is she plays wingwoman for Vivian at the bar. I started suspecting she was cheating on me with men she would meet at the bar but I still had no proof. One day I couldn't hold it back anymore and asked her to see her phone because she has been acting differently and suspecting she is cheating. Bianca threw her phone at me saying that I'm ridiculous to think that she was cheating because she loves me and only me. I checked everything on her phone and there was still no proof of her cheating. I started to think I was the one who was just insecure. Bianca very well made it clear that I seemed crazy in her eyes. An effort to rekindle things I scheduled a weekend getaway for me and Bianca. I had my brother watch the kids. Things were going great until an hour and a half away from home Bianca realized she left her work laptop at home. She made a big deal out of it saying she had something to complete over the weekend. I told her not to worry, and let's just focus on us. When we got to our resort I got a lot of notifications from my brother. My brother texted me saying that he was sorry that he checked through my wife's email. It was just open but he wanted to know why she wasn't sleeping with me. He sent me photos of my wife and Vivian emails talking about the intimacy they had with each other a few days ago. I told my brother to try to sign in her email to his phone through Microsoft 365. That way we can keep track of their conversations. I was shattered that Bianca would cheat on me or even lie like this. The woman that I allowed her to bring in my home she was sleeping with. Since we already paid for the resort for the weekend, I still had to spend my weekend with her. I tried my best to not show her I was upset because I wanted to blow this up in front of her parents' face. Bianca even tried having intimacy with me which I denied. Bianca started to realize something was wrong and kept asking me if I was okay but I told her I just wanted to focus on our getaway. After a very silent drive home Sunday. We got home and my brother didn't even start to talk, he just left barely even speaking a sentence. Bianca already started talking about she was going to have a busy day at work Monday. I do love my wife but I'm confused if she wants to be with her coworker or me. I plan on seeing her parents today, to let them know what she has been doing so they can take her in until I can gather myself. Boss tried to sleep with my fiancée. So my boss, an extreme type A personality, found out I was seeing a young lady at another one of our offices. It was a long-distance relationship. He was the type he liked to control everything and mess with people for fun. He was also married to another employee, but he was very unfaithful. And he had a hobby, photography. He liked to take pics of himself and his conquest, in the act. Then he would show the pics around the production floor and brag about it. Well, on his next trip to this other office he tried to get my girlfriend to sleep with him, but she spurned him. He made up some lies and got her fired. It took a long time but I was patient. I knew he kept the photos in his office. He could not risk keeping them at home where his wife might stumble upon them. One Saturday I was working out and the cleaning lady came through. They unlocked his office. I came in acting like I was taking dimensions on some drawings. The lady just asked me to close the door when I was finished. She left and went down toward accounting. That's when I went through his desk. Sure enough, in the back of one drawer I found a stack of photos 4 tall. I took them all. Then I waited until he went on another trip. When he did, I went out for lunch. I had a dozen pics of him, in the act with 4 different women, all showing his face. The women all had dark or red hair. His wife is a blonde. I drove to the town he lived in, to the closest post office to his house, and mailed the pics to his wife with no return address. She divorced him, and her lawyer took him to the cleaners. My girlfriend is now my wife, and we aren't mad anymore. What is something bad you have done with no regrets? Worked as an orthopedic nurse for 2 years. The orthopedic director, Dr. Stupid, not only a tyrant, but he also didn't believe people had any pain after having a total knee replacement. If you aren't familiar with total knee replacement, it is very painful after. I frequently got orders from him for Tylenol, when patients said they were in agony. I sat beside so many times holding the hands of innocent little old ladies we were in excruciating pain. I spent so much of my shift calling Dr. Stupid and demanding pain medication for suffering people, only for him to order non-narcotic pain relief. These people needed serious relief and all he would order was ice, walking, massage, and other nonsense like that. He finally blew a gasket one day, and codified all the things we had to try before contacting the physician for pain relief. He even codified it into policy. One day, I arrived for work to find all my coworkers arguing about taking a patient. This wasn't news, because we had any number of frequent flying Karens, who could make your shift awful. But this one was different. The patient was Dr. Stupid. He had just had a total knee done. I had a smile as big as the Grinch on Christmas when I volunteered to take him. On assessment, he rated his pain a 10 on a 0 to 10 scale. I told him his pain couldn't be that bad, it's just knee surgery. Didn't you tell me it doesn't hurt? He then demanded I get him some IV morphine or Dilaudid. No can do, doc. You're not the physician on this case, and it's policy that we try all these other things before I call. I made him work through the whole list just like everyone else before. At the end of my shift he was crying so hard, he was blowing snot bubbles. I don't feel bad at all. After his stay, his orders changed to include pain medication. I skipped my friend's Star Wars party. Background: Lola, 26 yo, F, Bugs, 25 yo, M, and Sylvester, 25 yo, M, are some of my, 26 yo, F, closest friends from college. Sylvester befriended each of us separately during our freshman year of college, facilitating each of us meeting each other. My twin sister and I were close friends with Sylvester but became close friends with Lola and Bugs as well after their main friend group imploded, isolating them and Sylvester. Since then, Lola and Bugs have gotten married and they and I are still at the same school getting our PhDs while my sister is in a different state getting a DNP and Sylvester is traveling the country while working remotely. He left and got a master's, moved back, and then moved home to save money so he could travel. Last year's Halloween party was the center of an insane amount of drama. Both Lola and Sylvester wanted to host. I assumed we were throwing the party as a group regardless of where we hosted. A lot of feelings got hurt, and 2 days before the party, it looked like there would either be 2 parties or none. By the time it all got sorted out, with Lola and Sylvester hosting the party at Sylvester's place, I had completely lost interest in attending and had already made other plans for the weekend without telling anyone. Funny thing though, I had been asking about the party and doing a group costume with Sylvester and Tweety, as we were the only single ones in our friend group, for over a month. Another member of the group, Daphne, there were about 7 of us who hung out often in some capacity, had let it slip that there had been talk of doing a friends group costume, with the 2 couples in the group dressing up as Monica, Chandler, Ross, and Rachel while Sylvester dressed up as Joey, but, as it sounded like that idea wasn't happening, I didn't think too much of it. Instead, I jokingly pointed out that there weren't any black characters on the show besides one random character that shows up for 2 episodes. I am the only Pac in this friend group. The night before the party, a Thursday night, Sylvester texted me to let me know that he was going to the party as Joey, and Tweety was going as Phoebe. He asked if I wanted to go as Ursula, Phoebe's twin, to which I responded, literally how? Tweety is blonde-haired and blue-eyed, much like Phoebe and Ursula. I am black, Sylvester responded with I don't know and the conversation died there. The party happened on a Friday. Monday night I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw a post from the party. I was excited to see everyone's costumes and had been waiting for someone to post. Imagine my surprise when I saw my 6 closest friends dressed as the Friends characters from a Halloween episode. I tried to keep scrolling and move on, but my thoughts got the best of me. This costume had been discussed weeks in advance, without me. No one knew that I wasn't going to the party until late Thursday night. Sylvester only mentioned that he and Tweety were going as Friends characters. These were my closest friends. And I know what it sounds like. Maybe I'm a little delusional and I'm not really part of the group, or maybe I thought we were closer than we really are, or maybe I'm inserting myself somewhere I don't belong like I was doing with the party planning. But here's where I kept getting stuck. Aside from the amount of time that I spent with these people, Lola and Bugs had made me, along with my twin sister, their son's godmother and had indicated that I would also be godmother to the child Lola was carrying at the time. I thought we were close. I thought I was close with the whole group. How did an entire group costume get planned and executed without me knowing? Did they just forget about me, or did they not care if I was part of it? Honestly, growing up in the Midwest as a child of immigrant parents comes with a lot of traumas. The least of which is probably the trauma that surrounds friendships and exclusion. But something about this situation managed to trigger that trauma just right, wrong? Monday, when I found out, my chest hurt. Tuesday, when Daphne brushed off my questions, saying that it wasn't helpful to drag up old drama and that she had just done what she was told and showed up in costume, my chest hurt. Tuesday night, when Lola and Bugs didn't respond to my texts, my chest hurt. Wednesday morning, when Lola and Bugs sent dismissive, gaslighting texts, and said that me questioning people individually was reminiscent of a witch hunt, my chest hurt. Wednesday night, I sent a group text explaining that I wasn't trying to cause drama and that I was hurt and confused and just needed help understanding what had happened so that I could move forward. I actually felt so much better after sending that text. Thursday, I landed in urgent care. It's not fully known what causes costochondritis, inflammation of cartilage in the ribcage, but stress is a contender. None of the people in the friend group checked in to see if I was okay. Eventually, I agreed to meet with Lola, Bugs, and Sylvester to talk. I refused to meet up with all 6 members of the group at once, and, as I had anticipated, the conversation focused on them trying to absolve themselves of any blame and insisting that the costume wasn't a secret without ever explaining how my closest friends managed to organize and execute a 6-person costume for a party I'd been asking about for over a month without me ever knowing until the night before. Things were rocky for a while, at least, for me. But I stayed friends with everyone. I now have 2 godsons, and I feel like we've made it to a good place. Lola, Bugs, and Sylvester decided on a Star Wars theme for this year's party. When Lola sent me a picture of the character they had thought of for me, the third sister, I told her that I appreciated being included, but that I would not be participating. I pointed out a common theme between the office-themed party from undergrad, where my sister and I dressed up as the camera crew because the only characters left were Stanley, Val, and Daryl, the friend's costume from last year, and even this year's costume, noting that I was never part of the initial conversations and was constantly left to choose from obscure side characters. Many of the texts sent back and forth over the course of the next few days were longer than a CVS receipt. The gist: Lola and Bugs insist that the third sister is not an obscure side character, but a popular main character in a spin-off series and don't understand why that would stop me from coming to their party. At no point did they acknowledge the office party or the friend's costume. Lola insists that I am either mad at her or don't consider her a close friend because this is the second event of hers in a row that I'm skipping. I prioritize other friends over her, and if I were throwing a party with a theme she didn't know anything about or care for, she would certainly be in attendance because that's what close friends do. After much back and forth, I finally told her that the costume was completely arbitrary and that I was never going to go to this year's Halloween party because last year's debacle was traumatic for me, and the idea of this year's party is triggering. I let her know that I am more than happy to celebrate any other holiday with them, that, as of now, I have no plans to go to any Halloween parties, and that the only person I am prioritizing over her is myself because I am the sole person responsible for me and my mental/emotional health. Her final response was that if I was going to prioritize myself, she was going to prioritize herself and take a step back from our friendship. I gave my boyfriend a night so good he proposed to me. I have been dating my boyfriend, Alan, for 7 months. He absolutely loves it when I go down on him and he always jokes about it and has nicknamed me Squirrel, as I know how to get a nut. His other nickname for me is Gawkstar as I play guitar. Usually I find it pretty funny. Lately things have been ramping up in the bedroom and with him getting extremely invested in the gym, his drive has gone up. For his birthday I decided to surprise him with some Tabs chocolate. It is ASX chocolate and according to my cousin has made him the happiest man alive. When his birthday came I spoiled him with gifts, and also this chocolate. He was confused at first but then I explained. He did not believe in its effects at first. Later on rolled around and he gave in to trying the chocolate. He took 2 pieces and threw on a TV show. An hour later he was starting to get turned on and looked at me and said perhaps I was wrong about this. We climbed into bed and got to making out. I had not seen him so into it in a few weeks and he seemed like he was having the time of his life. Finally when I started going down, he said to me if this is really that good I'm proposing. Famous last words. 15 minutes later he looked like a cold homeless kid with how much he was shivering. When he finally finished, his 6'3" frame was shaking head to toe and his speech was slurred. I smirked and told him I told you that chocolate is good. I calmed him down and got a towel and wiped what was left off his stomach and myself. Another 15 minutes later he got this mental strength back, stood up, grabbed me out of bed, got down to one knee and proposed there and then. He did not have a ring, however it was official. He kissed me and repeated how much he loved me. This was last week and we went engagement ring shopping together. He bought me a beautiful ring and I love this man. When he did he put it onto my finger and told me, "For you Gawkstar, what is the worst secret your significant other is keeping from you, but that you actually know?" Even though we had been married for 25 years, my wife and I always invented stupid private jokes between each other. I was lamenting the fact that we had fostered a Siamese cat from an adoption group, that eventually got adopted, and I really missed her. At one point, we were looking through the website of the local pound, and a Siamese came up named Montague. The photo that they took of Montague was epic. A classic apple-head Siamese. He was neutered, about 5 years old, and had horribly crossed eyes. Whoever took the photograph of him made him look both proud, distinguished, and adorably insane. Like some crazy dude that comes into the bar as a regular, claims he's the Emperor of the United States of America, and everybody buys him around because even though he is clearly crazy, he is also very charming. We started making up all the stories about Montague in a spoof of the world's most interesting man. Week after week, we checked to see if he had been adopted, but nobody wanted a crazy-looking cross-eyed Siamese cat. Everyone at the pound said he was affectionate, and had been there for quite some time. Sadly, this would be our last private joke together. My wife, who had a terminal illness, suddenly got much worse and passed away rather rapidly. We thought we had more time together, but she had sarcoidosis, and her lungs had already been weakened by repeated pneumonia, when she got the flu, because she was on immunosuppressants for her condition. This is what did her in. She went into a coma, and passed a week later. My sister helped me with the funeral and took care of a lot of things, including contacting everyone in her phone contacts on her cell phone. She asked me about why the Alexandria Pound would be trying to contact my late wife via voicemail. Apparently, my wife had applied to adopt Montague as a surprise gift. She paid the adoption fee and had scheduled a visit to adopt him, but she passed before the appointment date. Sadly, my wife put it in her name only, and the people at the pound were pretty rude about it. Like to adopt Montague, I'd have to pay another adoption fee, and they were made that she didn't show up, and at the time it was chaos I couldn't deal with. My sister gave them an earful and they told her to go to hell. What's your craziest but wait, it gets even worse story. I work as a police and fire dispatcher. This in itself is stressful. In 2017, we were in the middle of a very busy evening with a major accident when I looked in our computer-aided dispatch, or CAD, and saw registration information. I realized it was the car my mom had just bought my 17-year-old daughter. But wait, it gets even worse. The accident was so bad, they were asking for multiple engines and rescues. Then I noticed the traffic units are being dispatched. This only happens with great bodily harm or death. But I couldn't leave, even though by now I had confirmed it was my family on scene. I had to get them help before I left work. The field units were barking out orders and demanding resource after resource. It took everything I had to sit there and get them what was needed. But wait, it gets even worse. I was finally told I had to go respond to the scene. My 68-year-old, mentally disabled adopted sister was injured, hysterical, and they were unable to calm her down. In addition, my 17-year-old daughter was injured and refused to be treated. She only wanted to leave and wait at the hospital to hear about her grandma, my mom, who the rescue units had scooped and ran with. This means the paramedic felt my mom had a very slim chance of survival and she might make it out alive if she gets to the hospital quickly. My mom broke her both legs, both arms, all the fingers in her right hand, her pelvis, hip and back. She was in a medically induced coma. She miraculously survived but was bedridden for the rest of her life. She needed help with everything. She was still lucid. She just never walked again. Throughout the year, she contracted sepsis multiple times. She would refuse to go to the doctor or stay in a rehab facility. She would only go when she was unconscious or not lucid enough to say no. But wait, it gets even worse. Back in 2016 I noticed a lump in my abdomen. I was told it was scar tissue, so I went to the doctor over and over again and their diagnoses ranged from a cyst to an infection for which I was prescribed antibiotics for. It wouldn't stop growing. By 2018 it was the size of a cantaloupe. It ruptured at work. The bleeding was so bad I was soaked in blood from the waist down. Finally my doctor decided to remove it. They left a huge gaping hole which had to be packed. It kept getting infected, no matter how many times I would clean it and how thorough I was. I was told it was nothing to worry about. After a third massive infection I scheduled an appointment and saw a nurse practitioner because the doctor wasn't available. It was at this appointment where I was asked, why aren't you getting treatment for your cancer? I was told the mass was a cyst, but when it was tested further they found lymphoma. By the time I got to an oncologist, I had stage 4 cancer and 27 tumors. I had to be hospitalized because the infection was so bad, I needed 4 antibiotics. But wait, it gets even worse. I had to move back in with my mom before all of this happened to pool our resources together to make ends meet. We had an agreement on rent. My mom had always been bad with money, don't get me wrong, she was a great mom. Had no substance or gambling habit, she just loved to buy junk online. While I was hospitalized, I found out our house was in foreclosure. The mortgage company would not work with us. They wanted $30,000. I had to scramble to find us housing which was handicapped accessible, while being hospitalized. My mom got sepsis again. She was transported to the same hospital where I was admitted. This time she was so bad, doctors recommended hospice. In this hospital, hospice was on the same floor as cancer patients. My mom died 400 feet from me, but I was not allowed in her room. I was not allowed to say goodbye. She had contracted MRSA and I was a patient with a very large open wound and a compromised immune system from the cancer. But wait, it gets even worse. I had a daughter I had to support so I worked right through chemo. I was in an incredible amount of pain and I was very sick. I was very cranky and my brain was fried from chemo. The quality assurance specialist was nitpicking everything we did as a department. I was accused of saying someone should shut her up, so she filed a complaint on me. They opened a whole investigation for the inappropriate comment I supposedly made but they refused to pull the video to show me where I said it. We are recorded at all times. I was told since I didn't remember, I must have said it, I was too tired, too sick and too weak to fight it. Most of my coworkers were very supportive, but there is always that one. But wait, life wasn't done with me yet. I had to stop working for 6 months, and I ran out of sick leave. My employer would not pay their portion of the premiums unless I had sick leave. Their part of my health insurance was over $1,000 a month. The first round of chemo failed. The second round of chemo failed. I had to move 500 miles from home for treatment. I had to live in a hotel room alone. I was so sick after my treatments I couldn't walk more than a few steps. I had to crawl to the bathroom and just ended up sleeping on the bathroom floor in the hotel room because I didn't have the energy to crawl back to my bed. I was supposed to be on anti-seizure meds but I couldn't hold them down. I ended up having a seizure and was found unconscious, barely breathing by the hotel staff. I was in a coma for 9 days. When I came out, I couldn't walk at all and had to use a wheelchair. I ended up with cytokine release syndrome and was straight up crazy for a few weeks, or so I'm told, as I don't remember. And I think that's it. I'm slowly recovering from going through all this, and am on my 3rd round of chemo. I hope with everything I have that life still isn't done with me. I want to see my daughter graduate college and become an adult. I still have hope. There is nowhere to go but forwards. I'm thinking of divorcing my wife after she thought I was lying about the unthinkable things my babysitter did to me as a kid. I was 27 male, and my wife, 26 female, have been married for 2 years and have been together for 6. For context, I was repeatedly SA'd by my brother's babysitter when I was around 9. She would do unthinkable things to me whenever my 4-year-old brother was sleeping. Most of the time I was just paralyzed and wouldn't or couldn't do anything to stop it. She would always buy me sweets or video games for my DS as a reward. So in a weird way, I started growing attached to her and would try and seek the abuse if it meant getting her rewards. I knew whatever she was doing was wrong, but she would always threaten to take my life if I ever told my parents, so I never did while the abuse was actively happening. Everything stopped as soon as she graduated college and moved states. I only realized how messed up the things she did to me were when I was around 14 or 15 and understood the concept of consent. When I tried to open up to my parents, strict Catholics, it never ended well. First they blamed it on adult films and claimed it corrupted my mind into imagining these things happening to me. If I claimed I was telling the truth, my dad would beat the crap out of me and my mom would ground me. I tried opening up to my friends, but their reactions weren't any better. My male friends just called me lucky and asked if the things she did to me felt good. My female friends claimed I was just lying to get attention and laughed in my face. I learned to just try and forget the past and vowed to myself that I would never mention this to anyone again. Now, until last week, me and my wife had heard some good things about this show called Baby Reindeer on Netflix from our friends. Going into it, I knew it revolved around SA and stalking. In my mind, I thought I was over the past and I could handle watching the show. No problem. Big mistake. At the end of episode 4, I was literally on the verge of tears and I felt all the supposedly forgotten memories come flooding back. At the end of the next episode, I couldn't hold it in anymore. My wife paused the show and just stared at me. After a while, I did finally manage to calm down a bit. She asked me why I was crying and I just let everything out. She said she was sorry, hugged me, and we went to bed soon after. I apologized to her the following morning for ruining our night. From the moment I let her know about the abuse, I felt something change in our relationship. No more kisses when I came back from work, and no more initiating anything intimate from her side. She wasn't mean or anything, but I felt like something was bothering her. I tried to apologize for maybe making her uncomfortable, but she would just claim there was nothing bothering her, and I was just being paranoid. Yesterday, me and my wife got into a pretty heated argument about her lying about taking out the trash, but during the argument, she said something that floored me beyond belief. She literally said, "At least I'm not lying about being sad. You damn narcissist." I literally couldn't process whatever just came out of her mouth. She tried apologizing right after saying that, but I just packed a few clothes and left to stay at my friend's house. She tried calling me several times since, but I haven't bothered picking up and have blocked her for the time being. I know I might have trauma dumped on her, and I know women aren't into that, but I just want some sort of acknowledgement and support. I don't have anyone left to turn to with this, and that's why I'm posting here. I've had 2 therapists to date and both didn't seem to help much. My gut is telling me to divorce her, but she's genuinely the love of my life. Throwing away 6 years because of this one moment doesn't sit right with me, but I don't know. Would I be wrong for wanting to divorce her over this? Terrorize my family? Enjoy losing everything and going back to jail? Myself and my wife had just had our 2nd child and moved into a duplex in an amazing neighborhood. Even had its own playground. We moved in and greeted the neighbors, a bunch of younger people, but they seemed okay. The first day after moving in we find that they're gone and they're left their 7-year-old, on a school day, outside our door with a bag of goldfish and a note asking us to watch him while they went out. QCPS call number 1. The neighbors and I got along really well. Old guy next door repaired bikes for a hobby and the next door neighbor did woodworking and would always come over to see the kids and send his grandkids over to play too. They warned us that our upstairs neighbors were trouble. Constant traffic going in and out and parties every single night. This was 110% the truth. It got to the point we couldn't sleep at night and we had multiple alterations to the point it was full-blown yelling matches. The landlord was useless and would do nothing to get rid of them, so I bided my time. Eventually one night they came home in their red Mazda 3 and it was destroyed. They must have hit someone and ran, so I called the RCMP to let them know, as at the very least I figured they'd get in deep crap, but oh man, I had no idea what I had just unleashed. Turns out the D-bag had a warrant out for his arrest for substance trafficking. He got hauled away in cuffs that night and entitled woman 2 got a visit from CPS again as they left their son home alone again. This wasn't once or twice, it was every single day. So my wife went digging for names and found the mother on Facebook. Using public record searches we found out that they owed Easy Home nearly $48K in assets as they had taken off from the original address with all of their furniture including TVs and a huge sound system. 48 hours later the sheriff was there with a box truck emptying their house. Took the beds, couches, TVs, the annoying sub woofer system, kitchen set and even the dressers. CPS came shortly after and removed the child from the house. I didn't enjoy seeing him taken away, but they never fed him and he was always in the same clothing and it was falling apart. We went out of our way to make sure he had full meals when we could not gonna let a kid starve. The D-bag went to jail for substance possession. He was out on bail and hid the substances in a dresser they took. Entitled Woman 1 went to jail for assaulting the sheriff and Entitled Woman 2 actually had a happy ending. Far as I know, after she lost her son, she went through multiple programs to clean herself up and started working to provide for her son. Ran into her a couple years ago and she thanked me for what I did. What is something that your parents did that you will never forgive them for? As I sit here reflecting on my childhood, I can't help but feel angry and hurt. My parents did something to me that I will never forgive them for. They were helicopter parents, always hovering over me and never giving me the space I needed to grow and learn on my own. But it wasn't just that. They were also incredibly controlling. They dictated every aspect of my life, from what I wore to who I hung out with. I wasn't allowed to have any autonomy or make any decisions for myself. As a result, I grew up feeling suffocated and trapped. I rebelled in small ways, like staying out past curfew or wearing clothes that I knew would rile them up. But it wasn't until I got to college that I truly broke free. I discovered a whole new world of freedom and independence that I never knew existed. I made new friends, tried new things, and even started dating someone that they would never approve of. Needless to say, when my parents found out, they were furious. They called me a female and accused me of being a rebellious, ungrateful child. But the truth was, I was just trying to live my life on my own terms. Now, as an adult, I still struggle with the residual effects of their overbearing behavior. I have trouble making decisions and trusting my own judgment, but I refuse to let them control me any longer. I am determined to forge my own path and make my own mistakes, even if it means going against everything they taught me. So no, I will never forgive them for robbing me of my autonomy and stifling my growth. But I will also never let them hold me back again. I am my own person, and I will live my life as I see fit. Entitled Neighbor wants copy of Grandma's will. When my grandmother was diagnosed with cancer, she opted for no treatment. She had watched her husband go through chemo, radiation and surgery, and he was miserable the whole time. She didn't want that for herself. Her family supported her. Over the next year, she gifted items to family and friends, told us to write our names on the things we want, take what we wanted, etc. There were conditions. No, you can't have that. It's a family heirloom meant to go to Aunt and her kids, or to Dad and his kids. We all knew what those items were and who they were going to, so that was easily settled after she died. The house was inherited by my father, who very suddenly and unexpectedly passed away 2 weeks later. I inherited the house at that point. The next door neighbor, we'll call him Todd, came over several times, upset that he and his kids, 21, 19, weren't invited to Grandma's funeral. There wasn't one. We were all too busy reeling from my father's death, weren't presented with a copy of the will. It only included family members, and he knew Grandma loved his kids like her own. She didn't. She complained about them coming over all the time, stealing her water to fill their pool, and she had to tell them to stop calling her Grandma. He wanted to know if I would allow his kids to go through the house to see if there was anything they'd like to take to remember her by. Okay, first, dude. My grandma died 4 weeks ago. And, dude, my dad died 2 weeks ago. I thought he was awfully rude, but I offered to let them go through the boxes I had packed that I was planning to donate, and he was offended. I mean, mortified. He said his daughter and son had their hearts set on some items that were family heirlooms, and I literally laughed at him. I explained they were family heirlooms and would be staying with me, and 2 of the items had already gone home with my brother. He said my kids were her family and she would have gifted those to them. They should have been included along with everyone else when everything was divided up. Keep in mind that none of us knew this guy or his kids other than the neighbors next door. They were never at any family gatherings that were held at her house, and the only time I ever heard her talk about them was when she was complaining about them. Especially when she caught them using both her hoses to fill up their pool and then came over complaining because she had put locks on the outdoor faucets. Luckily, Todd's house was in foreclosure and he moved away about a year later. I have more stories, but those will come later.
How I humiliated my pro-Trump aunt in front of our entire family. One of my aunts has slowly been becoming a nastier person ever since 2016. She loves Trump, and he's the only thing she ever talks about. Every time I see her, she acts like more of an idiotic bigot, and if you ask me, she had today coming. If you're unlucky enough to find yourself in a conversation with her, be sure you're going to hear about every bullshit conspiracy theory parroted nightly on Fox News. I get along with the rest of my family pretty okay. My aunt is the only person who can really get under my skin with her ignorant smugness. Anyway, my family is close, and my mom often hosts family BBQs at her house. I usually avoid my aunt at these get-togethers. Yet at this last barbecue, my aunt was acting extra hateful and obnoxious. As soon as I got to my mom's backyard, I could hear my aunt going on and on to another relative about the transgender pedophiles. I've heard my aunt spew racist, homophobic poop before, but this was something new yet unsurprising. I don't know what it was about this particular day, but I just had it with the woman, and I knew I wanted to take an opportunity to give her a taste of her own medicine. I got a drink and a plate of food, and by the time I reached the table, my aunt was in the middle of quoting the Bible to prove that being gay and transgender was wrong in the eyes of the Lord. My aunt was in the middle of some line about respecting the image God made you in, which is ironic because my aunt has had 4 elective surgeries in the past year, not very godly of her. Anyway, at this point, I decided to interject into the conversation, to give my own 2 cents about the Bible. I started by saying, but, my aunt's name, doesn't the Bible advise against casting judgment on others? My aunt looked a little stunned, but all she said was that I shouldn't speak on the Lord's word since I live in sin. I assumed she was referencing my bisexuality, but I pushed right past this. I interrupted her and started quoting the Bible myself, thinking back to every quote about judgment that I had stored in my head. I made about 3 quotes. Every time my aunt tried to interrupt, I just kept talking loudly over her and told her not to interrupt the word of the Lord. At this point, a few other family members had come over to watch, and a lot of people were laughing. I wasn't the only relative who had enough of my aunt's bigotry, and some of my relatives were literally crying laughing as I kept talking at my aunt. I ended my rant with a quote from 1 John 2:9, "Whoever says he is in the light and hates his brother is still in darkness." When I finished, I just looked at my aunt with a big smile. A huge vein in her forehead was sticking out against her forehead, and I had never seen her so angry. My aunt literally flipped her full plate of food over, and walked away from the table, grumbling to herself, saying she didn't need to take this shit from some beach. Unfortunately for her, my mom was walking towards our table at that moment, and heard her call me the slur. That's when my own mom laid into my aunt. I never see my mom raise her voice like that, but it was great to watch her kick my aunt off her property for disrespecting me. All in all, it turned out to be one of the better BBQs my mom's ever hosted. I only wish a third relative got a chance to take a shot at my aunt.
I never talked about my wife's ex-husband with her. Until I found his diary. My wife, Kate, sometimes calls me Jack when she gets upset. My name is Tom. Jack was the name of my wife's first husband, and that's pretty much all I know about him. Kate was reluctant to talk about the marriage. It was unusually brief and, from what I gather, wholly unpleasant. I did my best not to pry. Still, the idea that there was a man before me would sometimes tug on my insecurities. I usually kept my feelings to myself as I didn't want to open any old wounds, but now I'm starting to wonder what happened to him. The boredom got to me one day. I just couldn't stand being trapped in my study for another 8 hours. Kate was at a medical conference, so I had the whole house to myself for a few days. After 1 or 2 bottles of wine, I found myself standing outside Kate's office. Kate was very protective of her office space, and I couldn't step foot in there unless I brought her lunch. But I was drunk, and my curiosity got the better of me, so I went in. Kate's office was smaller than I remembered. I sat down to clear my head when I noticed another door in the room. I was sure I had never seen it before. I opened the door and was greeted by a black room with soundproofed walls. In the middle of the room was a tiny round table with 2 lounge chairs was in the middle of the room. An old light bulb hung from the ceiling. What the hell was this place? It felt strangely familiar, and I felt anxious when I explored it. In the corner of the room was a dusty filing cabinet. It must have contained patient records. I know I shouldn't have opened it, but I was still inebriated enough to do something irresponsible. I opened the top drawer, but it only contained one thing, a wrinkled composition notebook. I picked up the notebook and realized it was someone else's journal. The first date was almost 10 years ago. Written on the top margin in faded black ink, Jack Taylor. I rushed back to my study and slammed the door. I knew I would feel terrible for invading Kate's privacy once I sobered up, but I started reading the journal anyway. The first entry was short, and many words were either crossed out or misspelled. Dr. Kate said I should keep a journal to write down my thoughts. She said it will help me feel better. So here they are. My name is Jack Taylor. I'm 25 years old. I was born in Waco. I like to be outside. I like to watch the Cowboys on Sunday. I like to drink Lone Star beer. That's all I guess. I almost started laughing. No wonder their marriage didn't last very long. This guy was a total dud and not at all Kate's type. I wonder what she saw in him. I decided to keep reading as my ego prevented me from not making fun of this guy. I glossed over to the next entry. I showed Kate my first page, and she got mad at me. She said that this journal was for feelings and emotions. Well, excuse me. It was her idea in the first place. I feel bad, I guess. She's so smart. And I'm me. Just a gardener. I'll have my own business someday, though. Then I'll ask Kate to marry me. I started to feel bad after the second passage. Jack may have been a bit dim, but I could definitely empathize with him. I always felt like I needed to be better for Kate. It could be hard to be with someone so much more accomplished than yourself. I mulled over whether or not I wanted to continue reading but decided to keep going. The following passage was dated almost a year later. I know it's been a while since I've written in this journal because I decided to only write when I felt depressed. Kate keeps bringing up the idea of me going back to school, and while that sounds nice, I'm content with our life. I enjoy writing and even have ideas for a book, but I'm not sure I want to return to college. The landscaping business is doing better than anticipated. It's blue-collar work, and I know Kate is embarrassed because her family back in Cornwall disapproves. However, we said our vows, which should mean more to her. I'll talk to her tomorrow. I need to put my foot down. I stopped reading to pour another glass of wine. It was interesting to hear Jack's perspective on his marriage to Kate. Kate never outright said anything nasty about Jack, but I always got the feeling that he was solely the problem. I guess situations are always more complicated than they seem. I flipped to the next page with a different perspective. Plus, his writing had improved dramatically since his first entry. The fighting with Kate is getting worse. Why can't she just accept me for who I am? I will never be the sensual, introspective novelist that she desires. I have a business to run. A business, I might add, that is paid for this house and extra additions for her new office once she finishes her residency. I'm just so exhausted from the constant mental gymnastics with her. It's almost like she's trying to conform me to her weird fantasy. I like what I do. I shook my head and took another sip of wine. It was almost surreal reading Jack's journal. We were more similar than I had initially thought. Was Kate doing the same thing to me? I really enjoyed teaching, but I knew it wouldn't be enough for her. I kept reading. Last night, I had that terrible nightmare again. I dreamt I was sitting in a dark room and sitting at a chipped wooden table. Kate was there too, and she kept turning the light on and off while saying terrible things to me. Before I woke up, she was screaming, almost foaming at the mouth. I've never seen her that angry before. I haven't been able to sleep very well recently, and I honestly don't feel like myself anymore. I've called in sick to work for the past 3 days. I thought being outside would help me breathe again, but working is the last thing I want to do. Perhaps Kate is right. Maybe a change of scenery would be helpful for me. I froze after I read the last page. The room Jack dreamt about had to be the same in Kate's office. Was Kate doing something to him? I crept back to Kate's office and slipped into the room again. It felt even smaller this time, and the feelings of anxiousness rose from my stomach again. I grasped my chest, struggling to breathe until I thought I was almost suffocating. What was going on with me? My knees started to buckle, and I slid into the cold wooden table's only chair. I looked up, and it felt like the Vantablack wall slowly moved toward me. I mustered up all my strength and threw myself at the filing cabinet to put Jack's journal back. This time, I knocked over a small manila folder from the top of the cabinet. Was this here before? I grabbed it and rushed out of the room, collapsing on Kate's chaise lounge. I quickly came back to my senses and inspected the folder. It was filled with documents, and on the corner was a rectangular blue sticker labeled Jack Taylor. Inside were patient records and various essays scribbled with handwriting that looked like Kate's. Was Jack Kate's patient before they were married? That didn't make any sense. Kate hadn't even started her practice when we got married. How was she already treating patients? And to marry one? Kate was almost paranoid about following ethical guidelines. To break her oath seemed unfathomable to me. Against my best judgment, I opened the folder and combed through the pages. Jack was undergoing treatment for dissociative identity disorder and depression. Early forms of therapy weren't helping, and Kate wrote in her notes that she would try a controversial form of treatment as an alternative. Hypnosis. My eyes immediately darted to the corner room, the door still hanging wide open, revealing an abyss. So that's what the room was for. I kept flipping through the pages and found through Kate's notes that the therapy seemed to be working, though Jack's disorder desperately tried to fight it. There were several documents on hypnotherapy and a letter from a former professor on his experience implementing the procedure. I knew from Jack's journal that he had vague memories of being hypnotized and that they manifested into his dreams. This was wrong. A photograph slid out of one of the papers in the folder. I picked it up to examine it. It was a picture of Kate and a man I assumed to be Jack. He was burly, with cropped black hair, a bushy beard, and an apparent farmer's tan. He looked familiar, but I didn't think I had ever seen him before. Maybe I learned too much about this man, but I'm deciding to confront Kate about him. She always preaches that honest conversations strengthen relationships, so now is the time. I'm going to finish up writing here and then wait for Kate to get home. It may be painful, but I need to do this for myself. And maybe even for Jack. I suppose I owe you an explanation. I'm honestly impressed at how much of a sleuth you are. I have no idea how you came across Tom's musings, though it does not matter. Fine, I will grant you this one favor. Jack came to me as a patient in the early 2000s. He was a gardener who drove his large truck through a bar during a manic episode. I must admit, he was quite striking when I met him. Tall, muscular, and hairy. Exactly my type, physically. He wasn't, oh how do you Americans say this, the sharpest knife in the drawer. But what if he could be? What if he could be convinced over time that he was the man of my dreams? Hypnosis is a tricky procedure, and it takes years to bind someone to your will. I hit an impasse after Jack and I were married. Until I had an epiphany. Jack Taylor would never be a romantic writer who would serenade me with poems and beach novellas. But Tom Rhodes could be. I didn't need to bend someone to my will, I needed to get them to believe they were not the person they thought they were. Through hypnosis, a gardener could become a novelist. Plus, I always preferred the name Tom. The experiment went extraordinarily well at first, but alas, Tom's disorder was incredibly resilient. It was like his DID was leading him to the truth in a twisted and cruel way. I knew he was getting close to finding out when he started writing less and drinking more. I told him I was going to a news conference and let him figure out the truth for himself. Where is he now? Oh, darling, I would not worry about Tom anymore. His job is done, and he is now at peace. I am ready to close the chapter on this experiment. I'm done with using hypnosis for love. But you, what are we going to do with you? Am I the jerk for overstepping and embarrassing my boyfriend's cousin at her birthday party? I, 21, have been dating my boyfriend, Ben, 22, for 3 years now. Ben and his cousin Rachel, 20, are extremely close. Their moms are sisters, and both single moms, so they were practically raised together. Ben usually treats her like his little sister and is very protective of her, but they're also just best friends and do everything together. I've known Rachel for years as we went to high school together, but we were never in the same circle of friends until I started dating Ben, which is when my best friend, Jess, 21, and I became part of their tight-knit group. Jess and Rachel didn't really get along in high school but have since been able to become pretty good friends. Rachel and I aren't particularly close. I like her a lot and wish we were as close as she and Jess currently are, but she doesn't seem to like me very much. I know that because she's told me off several times. One time on vacation she told me off after Ben and I had a little argument over where to eat dinner. Rachel told me I was being whiny and annoying. She's done this in front of their moms, and constantly makes little remarks when we're with friends. Ben doesn't see much wrong with it because to him, she's treating me the way she would treat a sister, and he finds it endearing that she teases me the same way she does to him, which is what I try to believe as well. Last week, Ben threw Rachel a surprise birthday party. I helped him plan and we both split the cost for anything we had to buy for it. I knew from Jess that Rachel had been talking to this guy who she really liked, so I thought it would be nice if I invited him as well as our friends. Fast forward, Rachel was surprised and the party was going great. We were getting along pretty well, which made me happy. We were all drunk when the guy Rachel liked arrived with a friend. I greeted them at the door and walked with them over to Rachel in an attempt to kinda wingman for her. Rachel was talking to Jess, facing away from us, and as we get closer we realize she's drunkenly telling Jess how much she likes the guy I invited and the friend he brought and doesn't know what to do, and then began comparing her hookups with both of them in great detail. Jess tried to get her to stop talking several times but she was too drunk to realize, and I was frozen awkwardly as these two guys heard the entire thing. When Rachel finally turned around she looked mortified. She went over to Ben and began telling him what had just happened. Rachel and asked him why he would even invite them, and he told her I must have invited them since he didn't. Before I could even get any words out, Rachel began going off at me saying I embarrassed her and put her in an uncomfortable situation, and that now she wouldn't be able to enjoy her party amongst other things. I felt so bad that I couldn't get any words out and basically just let Rachel go off at me until Jess pulled me away. Jess told me she agreed that I embarrassed Rachel and it was messed up of me to not try and stop her. I explained myself but she said it wasn't my place to invite them to begin with since I wasn't in the loop about Rachel's love life and it would be best if I kicked them out and left as well, so I did. It's been a week since the party and Rachel hasn't spoken to me. Jess thinks I should apologize to Rachel for embarrassing her at her party. I feel bad about this whole situation but I can't help but feel like it's unfair as I was only trying to bond with Rachel and didn't intentionally embarrass her. I feel I'm owed an apology as well since I basically helped plan and pay for the party and got kicked out before even being given an opportunity to be heard. Am I the jerk for overstepping and embarrassing my boyfriend's cousin at her birthday party? I reached out to Rachel and spoke with her. I sent her a big text explaining my side of the situation and tried to clarify what had happened. I didn't apologize, and I expressed my feelings regarding our relationship as well as the incident at the party. She was not very receptive and was not open to accepting responsibility over her own behavior. She said that I crossed a line, and even said she believes I embarrassed her intentionally. She thinks I invited them knowing about her situation. Apparently Jess was actually aware of that detail, and invited them both in an attempt to humiliate her as payback for all the incidents we've had in the past, basically, her treating me like jerk. I spoke to Jess as well. I reached out to her and expressed how I felt regarding her kicking me out of the party that I was essentially co-hosting, as well as how I felt towards her basically throwing me under the bus and enabling the situation between Rachel and I to get much worse. She was also not very receptive. I was surprised by that since we've been best friends for years and never had any issues within our friendship. It was clear she was completely on Rachel's side, and not only that, but also apparently shares Rachel's dislike of me, Rachel's belief that I planned this entire ordeal to intentionally humiliate Rachel, and thinks I tried to create a conflict between herself and Rachel as well. They both have said they believe I should apologize, now to both of them, and said they are not comfortable with being around me until I do. Haha, sorry, that's just laughable. I spoke to Ben about everything. I told him about this post, we read through some of the comments and we talked about this entire situation. He said he wanted to be aware of everything that was going on so he was with me while I texted with Rachel, and listened to my conversation with Jess on the phone. He apologized to me for not intervening sooner, for not leaving the party with me and also for not realizing that Rachel's behavior towards me was beyond sisterly teasing. He took full responsibility for not hearing me and not validating my concerns whenever I addressed them. He reassured me that he'll be speaking to Rachel about her behavior and setting firm boundaries, and promised to do whatever he can to make sure I feel comfortable and safe within our relationship, which was such a huge relief after everything that happened. There's something else he shared with me yesterday too, and this was honestly the one thing I was not expecting. Apparently, a few days ago, Ben, Rachel, and Jess were hanging out at Rachel's. He said Rachel didn't want to invite me and neither did Jess, and that he found it odd that they were verbalizing that to him. What he found the most odd though was Jess' behavior towards him. He said he felt uncomfortable and in the moment didn't want to assume she was flirting with him, but ended up leaving and after witnessing our conversation felt he should share this with me as he's starting to think there's potentially more to it. Moving on to today, literally a few hours ago, Ben came to see me and told me Rachel stopped by his place. He spoke with her and addressed everything he said he would. Her response to him was pretty much the same as her response to me. Shockingly enough though, she also told him she thinks he shouldn't even be dating me to begin with, told him she's no longer going to pretend to support our relationship and that he'd make a much better match with Jess. She ended up confessing to him that Jess has developed some feelings for him which is what brought them closer, and she's talked with Jess about how much better suited they'd be than Ben and I. He shut it down immediately and came straight over to tell me about it. We've decided that we're going to distance ourselves from the friend group and cut ties with Jess. He's already blocked her on everything, I didn't even ask him to, and left the group chat we all had together. I'm heartbroken to learn that my best friend would do something like this, but kinda starting to think she was never my best friend after all, though it still hurts to lose the only best friend I've ever had. I haven't spoken to her about this yet and to be honest I don't think I'm going to. I don't want to waste any more energy with such awful people. Ben's been extremely apologetic and feels really bad about the role he inadvertently played in all of this as well as the way Rachel has been treating me, which to me is a good sign and has been very relieving. He's an amazing guy and I'm so happy to see that I was right in thinking that all this time. He also respects my decision to cut ties with Rachel and has agreed to discuss further what kind of boundaries we will be putting in place going forward in terms of the family dynamic. He even spoke with his mom about all of this after our talk to make sure she's in the loop regarding our boundaries as well as Rachel's behavior. She was very understanding about it and they both even insisted on paying me back what I spent on the party, but I don't want to accept because their support is more than enough. With all of that said, it's only been a day so I'm not sure how this will all play out in the long run. I'm still very overwhelmed by the turn of events but nonetheless I'm glad I came here yesterday. If I hadn't, I don't think I would have gotten the courage and confidence to confront this situation the way I did. I've also decided to start therapy again for my social anxiety and to hopefully fix some of the self-esteem issues that I've been avoiding for a while, which is something I'm really happy and proud about, and I have to thank you all for helping me realize I needed that help. My husband has a female pen pal. I, 35, sensed my husband, 38, pulling away emotionally. I talked to him, he told me nothing was wrong, etc. He was still acting strangely. I began thinking he was being unfaithful. But I couldn't find any proof. I started to feel crazy. Nothing weird on his cell phone, nothing strange on the phone bill, he always seemed to go where he said he was going. And then one day I was putting away his laundry and I found a notebook folded into a hoodie. The notebook was full of letters between him and another woman. They passed it back and forth, writing letters to each other. It was just an ordinary black marble notebook, I could have seen it a million times before and would not have thought anything of it. But it was filled with letters back and forth. Pages and pages and pages of letters, nothing even overtly intimate, just deep, in-depth conversation. I confronted him and he didn't hide it. He said yeah, he has a pen pal, so what? I asked who he was talking to and it's just someone who lives around here. I asked how it started and he said they were waiting in line at the deli one day and they started talking. They both went to the same high school but he graduated 10 years before her. He said they talked for a while and they had to cut it off. And she said something along the lines of I feel like I still have so much to say, I could write a letter. And he said so go ahead and write one. So he got a notebook and wrote her a letter and gave it to her and she wrote one back and they just kept passing the notebook back and forth. He said this is the third notebook they filled up. He said they don't text or secretly hang out, they just write letters back and forth. He said he puts the notebook in her mailbox or sometimes they'll switch it out at the deli. It all seems so bizarre to me. I told him he could write letters to me if he wanted to write letters. And he said sure. So I said so there's no need to write to her too anymore and he was like no, I can write to both of you. And I told him it makes me really uncomfortable, especially since he kept it a secret from me. He told me he didn't keep it a secret, he just didn't explicitly tell me because he knew I'd overreact. He said he has no intention of cheating on me, so she might as well just be a guy friend that he's writing to. I told him would it be okay if I did this with a male, if he would be okay with it. He said if I could find a man who was completely okay with having an entirely platonic relationship over letter writing then fine, but he doubted I would be able to find someone who's want that. He thinks I'm blowing this completely out of proportion. He says she's a pen pal and she's not going to cheat on me, so what's the issue? The issue is this isn't a pen pal situation. He sees her, she lives 2 miles away from us. He claims they don't hang out, but how is it possible that they never chat for a while, etc.? This entire situation makes me feel so weird and he's making it out like I'm completely exaggerating. Since some people don't seem to get the issue. The problem isn't the letter writing. It's keeping it a secret. I spoke to the woman he was writing the letters to. A common thing I noticed was that he never talked about our relationship in the letters, but he did mention our children quite a bit. Apparently, he gave her the impression that him and I were separated but still living together to co-parent our children. She said that they did meet up, quite a few times, to exchange the notebook, which turned into sometimes hours-long conversations. She said they never did anything directly cheating, but he did flirtatious things, running his fingers through her hair and putting his arms around her while they were sitting next to each other, and she said she absolutely would not have allowed him to do those things if she had known we were still very much together.
I'm divorcing my husband after he gave me the ultimatum, open marriage or nothing. I chose nothing. My husband, 28 male, and I, 29 female, had been together for 9 years, married for 7. We got a not-so-classic shotgun wedding to give ourselves better chances of receiving custody of his half-sister, 10 female, when their mom suddenly passed away. Despite only being 20 and 21 years old, we did receive full legal custody over her absent father. This information isn't super relevant to the current situation, but it really sets the tone of our relationship with the sacrifices we made together, and the things we each had to give up personally to raise this beautiful little girl. We don't have any children together, but his sister is now 17 and moved in with an older, more financially privileged aunt last year. Over the past year of this newfound alone time, I feel like we have flourished each personally and as a couple. We never fight, arguments are rare, and we are pretty good at coming to understandings and apologizing when necessary. Basically, I feel we had a pretty healthy relationship. We each do little things for each other. I receive flowers no less than 10 times a year. We go on little vacations together and are generally really good. I guess a bit of the spark was sputtering out for a while, but I feel like that's normal for a relationship as long as ours. Fast forward to this past October. My husband seems like he has been depressed, which is normal for this time of year because of the timing of losing both his mom and dad in different years around the same time. The holidays are tough for him, so I get it and try to be there for him. He had previously planned to unalive himself because of family issues before we met, so I take his mental health very seriously. He sits me down to have a serious conversation and starts it by saying he wants to open up our relationship. I felt my heart drop to my stomach but stayed silent and let him talk. He doesn't go into why, just jumps right into rules and explains how he wants me to find someone first before he starts looking for someone himself. When I asked him why, he couldn't explain it and fumbled his words. I asked him if he already had someone in mind for himself, and of course he denies it. I couldn't help it, I definitely blew up. I was totally blindsided by this proposal. I slept on the couch after my outburst, and he didn't even try to come after me to explain anything, which kind of made me feel worse. I had never felt so unwanted in my life than in that moment. I have never given the impression that I was the kind of girl to be open to that kind of relationship. I will never judge anyone for wanting to live that kind of life, but it's just not for me. He went to work the next day, but I had the day off and really thought about my situation. After crying for hours, I came to the realization that this was the end for our marriage. Even suggesting an open marriage was a deal breaker for me, I realized. While he was still at work, I moved all his stuff out of our bedroom into his sister's old room, technically a spare room now. He comes home from work, ready to talk it out. After talking through more of why he wants this, I've come to realize several things. 1. He is way more wild than he lets on, and is disappointed with our bedroom life. He knows I'm not on the same level and doesn't want to push me past my boundaries to try things he knows I won't like. When I asked how he knows I won't like to try these new things, he explains they are an escalation of things he already knows I'm not down for but won't go into specifics. He also is unhappy with how infrequently we make love but has never really put in the effort to change anything regarding it. Just complained over and expected me to just be ready to do the deed any minute of the day. 2. He feels we have nothing in common now that his sister is gone. For context, he is more of the outdoorsy type, whereas I like to stay inside and read or play video games. I do venture out once in a while to do things he likes together and do genuinely enjoy them myself when I go, like kayaking and skiing. I do understand that it isn't as often as he would like though. 3. Because we got married so young, there are a lot of things neither of us really got to experience or try, mostly intimately. He is mourning the loss of his young 20s and never getting to sleep around and explore his fantasies. 4. Part of the rules he explained was that we wouldn't technically be sleeping around with whoever we wanted. He called it an open marriage but described it more as polyamory, where we would each have a boyfriend or girlfriend of our own that we went on dates and did things together. Someone we were each allowed to love and be with intimately. An emotional connection was pivotal for him, which broke my heart to pieces. During our talk, I told him I would never be able to look at him the same. I would never be enough for him, and he was basically trying to get a pass for guilt-free cheating in my eyes. I told him it sounded like he wanted to be with someone else without ever leaving the comfort of his marriage. Knowing he could date around and not worrying if those relationships would fail because he could just come home to me. He tried denying these things, saying he wanted to explore himself intimately but didn't want to lose me in the process. He tried getting me to agree to marriage counseling to talk about the open marriage concept. I told him just proposing an open marriage was grounds for divorce for me, and I wasn't willing to go to a counselor for them to gang up on me to try to bully me into trying it. I know in reality that never would have happened, but emotions were high in the moment. Because I told him I could never see him the same and how badly this crushed any self-confidence I may have had, he doubled down. He said if we go back into a relationship and pretend this never happened, then he would end up cheating on me. For him, it was open marriage or nothing. I chose nothing. Divorce papers were filed exactly 1 week later. He was very hurt, angry, that I could jump right to divorce and kick him out of our bedroom so fast. But I refused to be a second choice or have to fight for his attention. I can't believe he is okay with the idea of another person being inside of me. He is willing to just give me up to explore his options? I can't believe I wasted so much of my time with him. Helping him heal his family and raise his sister, I feel completely used. Did I overreact? Should I have waited longer before filing for divorce? Should I have just gone to marriage counseling, or was my gut instinct correct about the marriage being over? I still love and care about him, but my brain is screaming to be logical. We still live together while we are trying to figure out how to split everything, but now he is being super toxic and petty, saying hurtful things and then begging for personal details about my life. I need to get out of this house. How do I cope with these complicated feelings? Update 2 months later. Hello, all. I wanted to say thank you all for the support. As for the update, where do I even start? It has been over the required 90 days since initially filing for divorce before it can be deemed official. I'm going to the courthouse tomorrow to file the remaining paperwork. We had an easy, uncontested divorce. We agreed on how to split things with pretty much everything, and he didn't even give me a hard time about taking our 2 cats that are quite attached to me. He was always the spare human. I bought a small home for myself and said 2 cats and moved a few days ago. I won't lie, this whole process was very tough for me emotionally. It was especially hard considering he was constantly hot and then cold. He would jump from name calling and trying to control who came over to our house to finding reasons to call me on the phone all day and joking around with me like nothing was wrong. I feel like I have emotional whiplash from the last 3 months of living with him while looking for a new place to live. At one point, he came home to see me eating a meal I just cooked during a break from packing. It was pretty disorganized, but I was in the middle of doing multiple things at the same time. He saw the mess and started yelling at me for it and throwing my things around the kitchen. Another day, he texted me asking me why I wasn't interested in where he had been spending his days off and later sheepishly asking if he would drop the open marriage demand. Would I ever consider trying again? Of course, I told him we were way past that, considering the multiple times he promised he would cheat on me if we didn't open the marriage. Also, I did get STD tested and came back clean as a whistle. I don't think he was already cheating. But he is damned embarrassed about this whole thing. He wants me to tell people he cheated on me when they ask why we are getting divorced instead of telling the truth of the matter. I'm still not sure what the correct course of action is for that. He was made aware in advance that after I moved and the divorce was finalized, I would be going no contact. I did all the legwork to make this happen, including getting all divorce paperwork and 2023 taxes filed, separating all bills and bank accounts, hiding the address to my new home, blocked him on all social media, and I will even be changing my phone number once everything is finalized. He feels that me going no contact is vindictive. No matter what he has said and done to hurt me, I still have a lot of love for this man. He doesn't deserve it, I know. But that is exactly why I need to go no contact. It's for my own peace and to maintain some semblance of self-respect. I can't tell him that because I don't want to give him, or myself to be honest, any false hope that we could work things out. I have no plans to be with anyone else in the near or distant future. I just want to work on building my confidence and get in a healthier mindset. I haven't gotten to counseling yet like many have suggested. I was in survival mode for the last 3 months so I could get out of that hellish situation. Now that I'm in my new house and getting unpacked, I'm sure I will be able to relax enough to start feeling better soon. And if I don't, I have every intention of seeking professional help. I have a huge support network between friends and family. Our shared friends were all on my side as well. Not that there is a true right or wrong in a situation like this, but one of his best friends telling him this was the biggest mistake of his life was incredibly validating. The only thing I regret from my relationship with him is staying as long as I did despite all the red flags I ignored throughout the years. I went into detail on some of them in the comments of the original post. All I know is that I'm feeling a mix of relief and grief. I just need some time to allow myself to heal. Out of our many conversations, he told me that 99% of open marriages fail because they were open for failing marriages, and that since we had a great relationship, we would have been fine. I tried explaining to him that I learned, from some of you guys, that what he suggested was not an open marriage, but it was parallel to polyamory and it was the most difficult form of polyamory to achieve. He didn't care and was only focused on convincing me to work it out with him. For me, there is nothing to work out. He wants to be with someone else and to fall in love again. So I am giving him the freedom to do that but gracefully stepping back. As many have said, you don't get to have your cake and eat it too. There isn't much more to say on the matter. I said I was leaving, and I did it. Here's to hoping 2024 is my year.
Have you ever encountered a skinwalker? As my friends and I sat around the campfire in the forest exchanging ghost stories and laughter, a sense of unease washed over me. The forest seemed to hold its breath, an eerie stillness settling upon the land. It was then that a distant howl pierced through the night. Uneasiness turned to fear as we realized we were not alone. Eyes darted through the trees, catching glimpses of shadowy figures lurking just beyond the fire's glow. Whispers of dread filled the air as the unsettling truth dawned upon us. We were being watched by the dreaded skinwalkers. Legends spoke of these supernatural beings, shapeshifters who could assume the form of any animal. They possessed dark magic and were said to be cursed souls, trapped between the realms of the human and the animal. The forest became their hunting ground, and we were their unwitting prey. As the night wore on, the skinwalkers grew bolder, taunting us with their eerie calls and glimpses of twisted forms. Their haunting voices echoed through the trees, mimicking the cries of lost loved ones and driving us to the edge of sanity. We were trapped in a living nightmare, our fates teetering on a precarious edge. In a desperate attempt to escape, we fled through the forest, our hearts pounding with fear. But no matter how fast we ran, the skinwalkers matched our pace, their unnerving presence always at our heels. It was as if they were toying with us, reveling in our terror. Hours turned into eternity as we stumbled deeper into the heart of the forest, our minds teetering on the brink of madness. The trees seemed to twist and contort, their branches reaching out like bony fingers, eager to snatch us away. The very air grew heavy with malevolence, suffocating our hopes of survival. Just as hope began to fade, we stumbled upon an ancient stone circle, a relic from a forgotten time. With no other options left, we huddled within its protective embrace praying for salvation. The skinwalkers circled us, their glowing eyes fixated upon our trembling forms. Their whispers filled the air, a cacophony of ancient languages and dark incantations. But then, as if by some miraculous intervention, a brilliant light pierced through the darkness, banishing the skinwalkers from our presence. A figure emerged, clad in radiant armor, wielding a sword that shimmered with otherworldly power. It was a guardian of light, sent to vanquish the evil that had plagued our souls. The guardian fought valiantly, striking down the skinwalkers with each swing of his blade. His power was unmatched, and the creatures retreated into the shadows, their malevolence subdued. With a final nod, the guardian vanished, leaving us in awe of his heroic presence. We emerged from the forest, forever changed by our encounter with the skinwalkers. The horrors we had witnessed would stay etched in our memories, a reminder of the thin veil between the ordinary world and the realm of the supernatural.
My rude boyfriend asked me what's for dinner tonight, beach? As a TikTok joke. Now, he's pissed because I started a trend called saucing as revenge. I was over at my boyfriend's apartment this weekend and I was cooking dinner because he was studying for exams. I made pasta and a chunky sauce with meatballs and veggies. I told him dinner was ready and he goes, "What's for dinner tonight, beach?" with like a lot of emphasis on the last word. I was fed up. I'd had a pretty rough day with work and I have some awfully bad associations with that word being used by other people in my life who were pretty abusive. So I was so irritated that I dropped the pot of pasta sauce I'd been carrying right on the ground, and was like, "Well, nothing's for dinner tonight now. And I better not hear you using that word again." He was freaking out about how sauce had landed on his rug and he even said, "You're seriously acting like a beach right now." I don't know what else to call it. I just walked out, got takeout for myself and went to my friend's house. She thought it was funny, but my boyfriend was furious. He kept texting and calling and sending me voice memos trying to explain that saying, "What's for dinner tonight, beach," was a TikTok trend. And that he was just quoting something as a joke to put on TikTok. I thought that was the SHTest excuse ever. It doesn't matter if he saw it as a joke, or stole the joke, it was still disrespectful. But it didn't change the fact he thought that was funny, to demean me when I was trying to do him a favor. Like hell, I came over when he was studying to make a home-cooked dinner and he decides it's time for jokes? So I put my phone on Don't Disturb for the night and split a bottle of wine with my friend and her roommate. The next morning he sent me angry texts demanding I clean his rug because he was too busy with exams to do it. I was shocked he left it overnight. That's disgusting. I texted him back saying, "Yeah, so that's the beach tax, honey. Leave me alone till you're ready to handle your own cooking and cleaning because this beach isn't anymore. Also, it's fine you left that soaking in all night." He called me and told me that he was okay with doing his own household work, but I did throw a full pot of sauce at the ground, so that's on me to clean up. I told him, "Yeah, no, I'm not comfortable doing chores for you if you see me like your beach." He told me he didn't and it was just a trend, and I got pissed off that he was playing that TikTok trend BS excuse again, and I told him, "Well, I'm starting a trend called saucing, where as a little joke people throw pasta sauce around. You can't be mad because it's just a little trend, a little jokey joke, just a little prank, bro." He got really pissed off and hung up on me, and now I'm seriously wondering if this dumb effing TikTok joke is gonna be the end of things between us. Am I the a-hole for how I reacted?
My parents removed me from the will because of this. My parents are pretty wealthy people for the most part. I'm 26 and from ages 21 to 25 I was in and out of rehabs. I was abusing so many different kinds of substances and I wasted so much money. I OD'd once and it destroyed my family to watch me go through that. My parents are now approaching their late 60s and have started finalizing their wills and inheritance. Yesterday they sat me down and told me that I will not be getting any of the inheritance as they don't trust me not to relapse with all that money suddenly in my possession, and as a result my siblings will be getting my share of the money. I was pretty upset about this and I said that they were going to make my siblings rich while I would get nothing from it, and that wasn't fair. I was almost yelling at this point. They told me to calm down, but I was too upset to listen and I left. I called my brother and sister after I left and told them what my parents said, and they said that it was their choice and there wasn't anything they could do. I accused them of just wanting all the money for themselves and not caring about what happened to me. Today I have my dad texting me that they are worried about me and disappointed in my behavior yesterday. I talked to my sponsor and he said that while anger is understandable, I have to do everything in my power not to ruin the trust I've built with my family over the past year, and acting like an a-hole addict won't help. Sometimes I still have trouble with my reactions to things now that I'm sober, however I don't feel as though I'm entirely unjustified here. Am I in the wrong for getting upset here, guys? Guys, what's the most down bad you have ever been? I started talking to this girl one night after she messaged me through social media. We began talking about common interests with subtle flirting here and there. The following day I asked her to send a photo of herself. She proceeded to send 4 pictures, 2 of which she was in baggy clothing, the other 2 being top angles. All of these photos had 2 things in common. All had filters, and all hid what everything below her neck looked like. I instantly suspected she was a beluga. After talking for a little while, our conversation shifted to a more intimate context. She told me about some of her fantasies, such as getting tied down and tickled. I refused to follow through with that one but told her I'd fulfill some of her other ones. We made a plan for her to sneak over while my parents were out of my house the next day. Well, the next day rolls around and we talk about her coming over, which she later does. After waiting an hour for her bus to get to my house, I waited outside so she knew which house was mine. As she walks to my driveway, I noticed something about her. Not only was she hiding her body for good reason, but she was also very unattractive in person. Maybe a solid 2 out of 10. To put the cherry on top of the cake, she smelled like a mix of body odor and cigarettes. Me, not wanting to be rude as she had just traveled across town to do the devil's tango, walked her into my house and to my room. We put on a show on Netflix and began following through with what we had previously talked about, excluding the tickling. After finishing up what was and will be my worst intimate experience ever, we both just sat there. The post-nut was crazy. I actually went into my bathroom and took a long and hard look at myself in the mirror. I'm pretty sure a tear even streamed down my eye. I came back out and sat down. I sat there thinking about how I could get her out of my house without being rude. I finished a glass of water and said I was going to go fill it. I quickly pulled out my phone and bribed my sister to come knock on my door and tell me my parents were home early and that they needed me to help them unload groceries. I told her I was sorry and that I needed to go help. I told her to take the next bus, which was 20 minutes later. For the next 2 hours I sat there smelling like her and deeply regretting everything I'd just done. This inspired me to go do household chores to keep my mind off of what happened.
For more stories, head over to my YouTube channel, link in bio.
Smoke 420 in my house? I bet you'll love smoking everything at once. Yesterday, I came home early from work and noticed that the house smelled absolutely disgusting. I'm not an idiot, I know 420 when I smell it. Trying to be as silent as possible, I slowly went up the stairs and flung my son's door open. Sure enough, he was in there with the window open lighting up a blunt. I was shocked and appalled. This was not at all the kind of person I wanted to raise. When I told my wife, she was just as upset as I was. She broke down crying and berated him for almost an hour. To be honest, I don't think most of it got through because he was pretty stoned. We confiscated his 420 and his lighter, and that was that. That night, I was thinking about an appropriate punishment when I remembered what my mom did when she caught me smoking cigarettes as a teenager. She made me smoke the whole pack at once. It was such a disgusting experience that I have never touched a cigarette since. The next day, when my son got home from school, I went up to my son with his stash of 420, which filled up a pretty large Ziploc bag, and told that he was going to smoke the whole thing. He laughed at me, but I told him I was dead serious. I sat and watched while he smoked every last nugget. I think my procedure worked, because by the end of it he looked extremely tired and almost sick. I felt bad for making him do this, but I knew it would be good for him in the long run because he would never touch substances again. Since then, he has been in his room silent for the last 16 hours. I've never been prouder of myself.
My husband said something that upset another woman last night, but he won't tell me what it was. Basically just a vent because I know I'm probably just going to drop it. My husband and I have been married for 12 years. Last night we had a New Year's party at our house and a lot of neighbors came. My husband was speaking to one of the neighbors, 26 female, and then all of a sudden I looked over and she was really upset. The conversation they were having was clearly intense. I went over there to see what was going on, but by the time I got there she just said she was leaving. My husband seemed really flustered and was saying that he was sorry. After she left I asked what happened and he just said that he had said something that upset her. I asked what he said and he said that it was part of a personal conversation they were having, that he wasn't sure exactly what part of what he had said that upset her, but it was personal and he didn't feel comfortable sharing it with me because of how personal it was. This incident clearly bothered him and it's definitely still bothering him. I don't mistrust my husband. He says that the conversation they were having was personal but not romantic and he wasn't hitting on her or vice versa or anything. I guess I'm just bothered because this is something that seems pretty big. She was really upset. She left shaking and trying not to cry, and he's not telling me what it was. I know that he's allowed to have privacy in friendships and relationships, but if anyone leaves one of our parties in tears I kind of think I should know why, or at least get some details on why.
Who was the most badass historical character? Miyamoto Musashi, undefeated in 61 samurai duels, the first of which he was 13 years old. He invented his own fighting style using both a long and short sword called Naitan Ichi, meaning two heavens as one. He once had a sword master with his wooden sword so hard that his arm had to be amputated. He stood still in a sword fight against the previous master's brother so long that over an inch of snow built on the back of his sword, metal this time. He only moved when the brother's friend tried to sneak up behind him. He then unalived both of them with two swings. He unalived a monk who was a master of the long pole with his wooden sword. He unalived a master of the sickle and chain. When the master disarmed him he threw his knife about 10 feet and hit in the neck. One of the only true sword masters to live to old age with no facial scarring. He was publicly challenged to a duel by a 12-year-old kid who was a relative of a man he had unalived. When he approached the field from behind he saw 10 swordsmen and 2 men with muskets sitting in the tree above the kid. Musashi snuck up from behind, climbed the tree and unalived the musket men. He dropped out of the tree and unalived the kid who had challenged him and turned to battle the 10 swordsmen. It was during this battle that he was supposed to have invented his two-sword fighting style. He escaped with his life and a large body count. A short while later at a bar, Sasaki Kojiro was insulting Musashi to the people of the bar about ending the kid. A stranger wearing a hat approached Kojiro as the crowd cleared. He lifted his hat to show it was Musashi who sat in the back listening to Kojiro badmouth him. Musashi said he would unalive him one day. Musashi unalived him on the beach many years later. Musashi once unalived a samurai with his own wanted poster. Wanted posters were written on wooden boards like a for sale sign. I'm 34 years old, don't have any friends, never had a girlfriend, never had intimacy. And I don't want to change. But it kills me how this affects my mom. I've been a loner since my teen years due to physical disadvantages. I'm not disabled, but I'm ugly, short, balding from a young age and have a small penis. From an early age I've been made fun of and I've known that I'd always be the run of the litter. So I avoided social situations and focused on either studying or working, filling the voids with media consumption and later the gym. The way I see it, I was bound to be a source of either mockery or pity. I still may be, but at least by minimizing the time exposed to people I minimize the chances of catching them in the act and being humiliated. If I was ever able to find a couple it would have been someone as ungraceful as me, which I don't see any reason to pursue. So usually I've replaced female interaction with porn. And by delaying my blooming and meeting all social milestones I've made myself even more unattractive. Who wants to hang around someone with no friends at 30? Or date someone who's been dateless until now? Fake it till you make it? As though there wouldn't be any signs, my parents pushed me to get out of my shell and stop being afraid of rejection. I've pleased them by going to psychologists and psychiatrists sparingly through my late teens and 20s. I've seen a psychoanalyst at 18, a CBT therapist at 25, an existential therapist at 28 and an analytical therapist at 30. None were able to convince me that I was wrong with my attitude and that I should risk going out for the reward. All ended up telling me there's nothing they could do if I was set on my ways. This would be fine, but there are two things that have been bothering me lately. One is the existential dread that has been hitting harder in the last few years since the lockdowns, with me abroad. Feeling more detached from my family, the only relationships I have, perhaps made me feel lonely enough to feel sad and despair. The other is that in the last 2 visits home my mother has begged me to try to find someone, anyone, to hang out with. At least a friend. She's terrified that I'll end up completely alone and helpless when she dies. Not because I need help regularly but just in case I get sick or need a hand one day. I've seen her cry in front of me despairing that I've never experienced being loved. These last few months have been rough on me because of that. That picture of my mom fighting back tears because of me kills me. I don't want to change. The bridges have been burned and I don't want to be the pity project of any group of people. But I don't want to see my mother suffer because of me neither. What is your darkest secret? So I'm about 16, and I always go down to this bank to take money out. I only had a savings account, so I didn't have an ATM card at the time. There was always this cute chick working there. She'd always smile and greet me, and I'd always try to go to her line. As she was a bank teller, I only saw her sitting down. This is important later. One day, I just work up all the confidence I can and I ask her out as I'm taking out some money. She said yes. So we set up a time around the weekend for me to come over and pick her up. She gives me her number, I get her address, and I skip home as happy as can be. So it's the weekend, and I drive up to her house in my little beat-up Honda. I knock on her door and her dad answers. A split second of oh crap comes over me, but he just gives me this heartwarming smile and invites me into this house. I instantly feel at ease and we go sit down in the living room. Her dad is all happy like I'm so glad you're taking my daughter out and I really appreciate it and all this craziness. So I'm starting to think to myself, oh what have I gotten myself into? So her dad reaches into his pocket and pulls out a set of car keys. He says, I want you to take my car. I said no, that's okay, I have my car. He's all like no, practically forcing the keys into my hand. Still keeping his big smile on his face. No sooner does he give me the keys than do I hear from up the stairs, bzzz, no crap, she's in a wheelchair. A split second of shallow human being comes over me, but I think about it and say to myself, I can do this. She's awesome and has a great personality, screw it. We go outside, and I realize why her dad wanted me to take his truck. It was all rigged up with the belts and harnesses and the door that came all the way out for the wheelchair. So I took his truck, and we head to the movies. Best part? The handicap spot. So we're in the theater, and no sooner does the movie start, than she starts putting her hands on my junk. That's totally cool with me. We start making out almost during the whole movie. My parents are out of town that weekend, so I ask her if she wants to come back to my place. She says yes, so we get back in her dad's truck and we're on the way to my house. We arrive at my house, I have stairs, so I have to carry her inside. Thankfully my room is on the first floor. So I get her inside, throw her, and we start going at it. When all of a sudden I hear a pop and her leg comes off. She's got a fake leg. How did I miss that? Keep going, she screams as I pull her leg and throw that across the room. Am I the jerk for wanting my daughters to have a relationship? Long story short, I, 57, have a daughter, 23, that I had and have no contact with. I haven't seen her since she was a baby and I never had a romantic relationship with her mother who was a bit younger than me. No one but my wife knew of this until my family decided to do an ancestry DNA test and she popped up. At first I tried to play it off as a mistake, but my sister looked the girl up and went ballistic because she looks so much like my eldest daughter, 14, with me wife. My parents were upset that I held this information from them and my entire family has been calling me a deadbeat. She also popped up at my 14-year-old's tree, and now she's become obsessed with them meeting and finally having a sister as she only has 2 younger brothers, so I contacted her via Facebook and was met with silence, and then I contacted her again and she sent me a curt message that said she had a father and she has no desire to meet my family. I messaged she a few more times and she blocked me. My 14-year-old also messaged her via Instagram and while she didn't receive radio silence she told her that it isn't her fault but she has no desire to know her but she hopes the best for her. Paraphrased, the message was very long. This made my daughter feel rejected and she's been depressed ever since, especially since she seems to have a thriving relationship with her mother's younger children, so I attempted to contact her again, to which I was blocked on Instagram. This time I contacted her mother who also told me to leave them alone, so I got my wife to message my eldest daughter. They didn't go back and forth but my wife was also blocked. I don't understand how she can be so cold when a child wants to meet her. We even offered her money to just give her a chance. My sister told me I'm a jerk for stringing this along when it's obviously doing more harm than good and that my eldest is a grown adult who can decide for herself. My parents agree and say this is my fault. The only person on my side is my wife who thinks it's unfair she can be so cold to a child. So, am I the jerk? Never warn anyone if they are about to be fired. It creates a dangerous situation in the workplace, especially for women, and I will never do it again. About 2 years ago I was inadvertently made aware that one of my coworkers was about to be fired that Friday. We will call him Carl. Apparently Carl had made a habit of pissing off the wrong people and making misogynistic comments in front of his female supervisor. Surprisingly, that's not what actually got him fired. What finally did Carl in was the fact that he stupidly chatted up some powerful guy's wife at a company social event the week prior. Rule number 1 for company social events: never ever be too chatty with random women at these events. Stick to the people you know. You never know who she's married to and how powerful and insecure her husband may be. I only found out about Carl's pending firing because my job duties required me to spend a lot of time around upper management. My proximity to the halls and offices of upper management allowed me to overhear a conversation about his pending firing, and since none of the upper management personnel was aware that I knew Carl personally, they spoke freely about him right in front of me. They laughed for several minutes about everything involving Carl. From his mediocre work ethic, the chatting up somebody's wife incident, his wardrobe, and the inappropriate misogynistic comment he was accused of making in front of his female supervisor. I basically sat there stone-faced and disinterested to hide the fact that I knew Carl personally. It must have worked because they kept going on and on about how mediocre he was. When I was finally able to sneak away, I consulted one of my buddies for advice. Told him that Carl was getting fired on Friday and asked if we should warn Carl. This was on a Monday afternoon and we both agreed that despite Carl's many flaws it would be the decent thing to do to warn him so he can start his job search a few days early. Huge mistake. The next day, Tuesday, arrives and we invite Carl out to lunch. After we're all done eating we break the news to Carl. We tell him that we caught wind that he's getting fired on Friday and there's nothing he can do to reverse it. We also advised him to start his job search immediately and to call out sick on Friday so that they are forced to fire him over the phone versus humiliating him by having him escorted out by security on Friday, which is standard procedure. We also made him promise to keep a low profile the rest of the week and not make it obvious that he was aware of his fate. A promise that he only kept for the 20 minutes it took us to drive back to the office, because within minutes of arriving back at the office he stormed into his female supervisor's office and accused her of hating men, sabotaging his career, and actively working to get him fired. We weren't present for this part of the story, but apparently after storming her office so aggressively she asked him to leave her office. When he refused she literally screamed for help. That's when several people within earshot came running to see what was taking place. When they forcefully removed him from her office he took off running to HR. But in the midst of all of this chaos his supervisor panicked and pulled the fire alarm assuming that he was running off to get a weapon to come back and harm her with. I was completely oblivious to all these events, so when I heard the fire alarm I assumed it was a normal fire drill. Everyone on my floor casually exited the building via the stairwells, but when we made it outside we were greeted by several police vehicles arriving and cops literally running full speed into the building. That's when we were all told to go home for the day. I was still completely oblivious that all this was for Carl. I actually found out later on social media that Carl triggered all of the chaos. The next day I also found out that when the cops were searching the building for him they found him sitting outside of HR waiting for the fire drill to end so he could file a complaint against his supervisor. He had assumed it was a normal fire drill as well. He had no clue his supervisor had pulled the alarm on him because she was afraid of him becoming an active threat. He was fired on the spot. Didn't even make it to Friday. And this is why I would never tip anybody off ever again. Lesson officially learned. Has your friend ever tried to hurt you? I got an email from my best friend Joshua. In it, he denounced me as a betrayer. He said that I used him. He said trashy things about my other friends. This is only 1 week since the last time we hung out. Then he proceeds to accuse me of telling him to put his dog down, which I had no memory of doing. How did I do this? First, because we went to Subway. This meant I was speaking to him in subtext. Whatever that means. I asked him to go grab my wallet in the car because I had forgotten it and he interpreted this as me telling him to fetch, which meant I was putting him down like a dog, which correlated to me telling him he needed to put his dog down. Josh was going full schizo. After many emails back and forth trying to figure things out or make up with him, I give up and don't hear from him for months. Then at the end of April, there's a knock on the door and there Josh is, wearing a tool belt with a claw hammer on it, claiming the landlord had hired him to fix some broken trim. I don't think we have broken trim, but at the very least thought this was an attempt to reconcile with me via talking and that this was a ploy to see me. I let him in and we went upstairs to the kitchen. I go back to ask my roommate if he's aware of any broken trim. He shakes his head and I head back to the kitchen. I get there and I'm immediately hit in the back with a claw hammer twice. Once with the claws, the other with the head. I back up against the counter and Josh is waving the hammer in front of me. I start yelling for my roommate to get out here and eventually, he comes out to see this scene. Josh is demanding that I kneel on the ground for the final blow. He is spouting about how he already called the cops on himself, telling me I'm a child abuser, amongst other ranting. My roommate, bless him, somehow convinced my deranged best friend to drop the hammer. I took that opportunity to run to my roommate's room and try to lock the door so I could use the other door in his room to get outside and circle around to the landlord's place to get help. Josh barreled through the door I was trying to lock and then started trying to choke me. My roommate dials 911 but has to come back and try to pull Josh off of me. We struggle back up the hallway to the kitchen. We break the walls in the process and I'm still bleeding everywhere. I get loose for a moment and dash down the steps, out the front door, then over to the landlord's door. I open his door without knocking and just as I'm stepping inside, Josh is on me, choking me out from behind. I look to the landlord for help and he goes and grabs his gun, which makes Josh back off of me. My roommate stands between Josh and myself while the landlord goes into my apartment to look at the damage. Josh is telling me that someday I will be trapped in a storage unit being tossed food like an animal, that I'm a child abuser. He tells the landlord that the landlord is harboring a child molester. He's pacing as he's saying this, exactly like a caged big cat, with the same feeling of menace. Meanwhile, the landlord has seen the damage to his apartment unit and comes tearing back outside yelling at Joshua, telling him to throw a punch now that he doesn't have his hammer. Josh is basically pushed off of the property from the force of the landlord's anger. But not before he had the audacity to ask for his hammer back, which my roommate laughingly refused. It being evidence and all. Josh tells the landlord where the cops could find him and walks home. The cops find him exactly where he said he'd be. The aftermath is that I have an aching back for a few weeks, but with no permanent damage. Josh is convicted of aggravated assault and goes to jail. I spoke with his dad after the sentencing hearing and found out that his dad had found him sitting in his room talking to himself or giggling at things no one else could hear. He also sat in his front yard for 24 full hours, supposedly waiting for me to come hurt him. When I didn't oblige, he came to get me. I hope he gets the meds he needs, since he's sick and is someone I really cared about. I hope he gets better, but I don't think I could ever trust him again. Is there always an angry man in your house if you were raised with one? This quote was first written by C. Lacey in her first and only short story Cut. Lacey's short story is about a woman who feels so overwhelmed because she does not want her children to grow up in a home with an angry man. I see her point, I see it completely. Her story then continues on with the main character Emily and her husband trying for a baby, but little does he know she's using contraceptives because she knows. She admitted in the first sentence and she admitted it in the last she is her father's daughter. Eventually she tells him the truth and he tries to help her out, but deep down she knows the truth. My biggest fear is that I am my father's daughter, but that is a lie. I do not look like him, I do not think like him, I do not act like him, I am not him, I have watched fathers with their precious little babies and wondered what I did to deserve this. The first time I saw the angry man in my house, I were 5, I tried to justify his actions and sweep things under the carpet and just maybe, deep down I am my mother's daughter. You were supposed to be my best friend, you were supposed to the person I run to when the world felt too big for me. Instead I was complaining to the world about how small you made me feel, but it ends here. It ends with us. I refuse to ever have an angry man in my home again. When I come home I will run to my children and shower them with the love they deserve, all the love you deserved at their age. When I come home I will leave my problems at work, the same problems you should have left at work, and last when I come home we will pray together, and while they pray for pointless things such as clothes or new toys, I will pray that there is never an angry man in my home. 10 years later and I no longer have an angry man in my home, and although I have forgiven you for everything I still wonder if deep down I am able to break my generational curse.
Men of Reddit, what are women not ready to hear? The reason guys don't like romance movies, books, the act is it tends to be something they perform and not receive. The women who realize this are usually wildly more successful at dating. Yes, you put on weight. No, I really don't care. You still look good to me. But, yes, you put on weight. We wouldn't date you if you were a worm. Just because I'm ugly doesn't mean I'm a creep. Too many women have insulted me talking to their friends. Most of the time loud enough that I can hear it. Just keep your thoughts to yourself. We have feelings too. If you're one of those women who openly insult people for fun, know that you might be responsible for someone's bye-bye. See bat apparently.
My husband did not come home, so I showed up to his guy's night. My husband has been hanging out with his guy friends every weekend for about a month. It generally doesn't bother me at all, but lately he has been saying I will be home after this beer, and that one beer turns into 6, and he comes home in an Uber around 3 to 4 a.m. and well, I want to hang out with my husband. There's never any ill blood or fighting about it. I know he needs his friends, as we are currently going through a stressful time and he needs to decompress. However, when he went out on Saturday I told him, if you aren't home by 8 I'm coming to find your ass. He laughed, said he would be home by 8 and that was it. Well, by 9 he still wasn't home. I knew this was going to happen, so I planned it all out. I had already gone to the store and picked up a 30 rack, and, this is actually kind of embarrassing, but I threw on some of his clothes, put my hair up and put a hat on to make myself look more manly, and headed over to his buddy's house, where I knew he was. When I walked through the door my husband started dying laughing and the bear hugged me. His buddies, I'm close to 3 of them, were also heavily amused and thanked me for the beer. There was no issue there. However, one of the guys that I don't know all that well lives next door, and his wife comes over livid at like 2 a.m. and starts scolding him about being out so late, etc. etc. They have a baby at home, so it's 100% understandable. As soon as she saw me standing there, it hit the fan even more. She started accusing him of lying about it being guys' night. I did interject and say that I actually invited myself after my own husband didn't come home when he said, but she just put her hand up to me and told her husband to get home. I thought that would be the end of it, but my husband actually got a text from this guy yesterday saying that me showing up caused serious issues in his marriage and that next time he should tell me to stay the F home. My husband obviously laughed it off and said it ain't my fault there's issues in their marriage and that he was amused by me showing up, but now I feel utterly terrible. Am I the a-hole?
What's something a friend has said to you that changed the way you look at them? I have a friend who somehow never seems down or sad, so I always thought he was just a happy kind of guy. But one day I was complaining about some stupid shit that happened at work. It was over some small exchange that didn't really matter in the long run, but I was letting it get to me hours later. After 10-15 minutes of me venting and saying today was a shitty day, he simply asked me, "Are you having a bad day, or did you have a bad 5 minutes and you're letting ruin your whole day?" Made me realize it's up to me to have a good day, and that he goes through day-to-day shit too, but knows how to handle it. It made me realize that he wasn't just a happy kind of guy, he was a wise person. My first year of college I was feeling a bit lonely at Christmas time because things weren't working out for me to get back home with family for the holidays. One of the friends I'd met on campus first semester invited me to spend the holidays with him and his family and to meet his friends back home. It was as if he and his family had adopted me for the occasion, and made me feel truly included and part of the entire experience, as did his friends there too. His invitation made all the difference and was the start for me to do similar good deeds for others.
Am I wrong for taking in my sister's white baby after her death? 3 months ago, I was made aware that my white half-sister, I'm black, who I hadn't spoken to in years, had passed away. She was much younger than me and we were never close due to her living with her dad. She has a 1-year-old daughter, Jane, whose father is not in the picture. We were the only living family willing to take the baby in. It was an easy decision, but not an easy adjustment. Our sons did not have an issue with it and supported the decision. Our daughter, on the other hand, was very indifferent and refused to even see my niece. She dropped her daughter 7 off at our house for the weekend and was angry when she came home with one of my niece's white dolls. She told us that it was bad for her self-image to be playing with dolls that didn't resemble her. I tried to explain that the kids play with dolls with all different colors. A 1-year-old could not care less what shade her Barbies are. It all seemed baseless and out of nowhere considering our granddaughter adores the baby and helped care for her. She loves playing mom for a bit. We still spend alone time with her too, doing her favorite activities. It turned into a larger argument when she started ranting about how seeing us care for a white child made our granddaughter feel jealous and less important. Apparently, it also hurts my daughter to see us put so much time into raising a white baby when we failed our own children so much growing up. I tried to ask what we did wrong because we truly did our best to raise our kids well and provide them all they needed. She started crying about how she felt betrayed and seeing us dote on Jane while she never received that motherly love growing up hurt her. I told her that if she wanted to talk about what her childhood might have lacked, then she needed to leave an innocent child and that child's color out of it. She was cold about us taking in Jane from the beginning, and it's manifesting as genuine anger and resentment now. When I brought that up, she cut off the conversation immediately and refused to speak about it. A few days went by and she reached out to me letting me know that we would not be allowed to see our granddaughter until we put our real family's needs and well-being first. I told her that the baby is family and she went dead silent again. I love Jane like she's my own. My husband does as well. My sons see her as another niece. My daughter is the only one with any problem. How do I even rectify this situation without turning the entire family upside down?
Pet owners, what is the biggest flex your pet attempted? I found Wade for sale at a pet store. He's a beautiful brown cat, with classic brown and black striping, and a pretty big boy all things considered, real pair of mittens on him. I knew that we were meant to be when I opened his cage, and the first thing he did was headbutt me. I bring him home, and we get acquainted over time. I learn that he's incredibly loving and chatty. He loves following me around and wants as much attention as possible. I also learn that he's sneezy to the point I go get him checked out. One vet visit later, and I find out he's got feline herpes. Honestly, not that big of a deal, he's just more prone to respiratory infections and is always going to be kinda sneezy. The vet told me to give him a lysine powder twice a day with some wet food, which will help mitigate the symptoms. No problem, I'm happy to spoil my sweet boy as much as he wants. I keep up on it, and we move in with a couple of my friends whom I live with for the next 4 years. They adore Wade as well, and he quickly becomes our little sneezy mascot for the house, constantly being showered in attention by either his dad or one of his uncles. Now, even with the powder treatment, Wade is a sneezy boy. The worst part is feeling awful for him when he's sneezing, knowing how uncomfortable he must be. Part of our coping mechanism for his sneezing, outside of constant petting, wet food, and adoration, is making fun of Wade for being adorable and useless. We would regularly hold conversations with Wade, responding to his meows in outrage at how offensive he could be, and reminding him that he'd never survive out in the wild with nobody to make his wet food for him. So, one afternoon, I'm sitting on our screen porch having a beer with one of my roommates while Wade keeps us company. As we're talking, there's a moth flying around our heads that Wade is watching intently. We're sitting in lawn chairs, so the moth is probably only 4 feet off the ground or so. As we sit and drink, we're joking around and berating Wade for being so lazy as this moth flits about without a care in the world. We joke and joke, as Wade sits there, receiving head scratches and watching the moth. After about 10 minutes of goofery, the moth dips slightly lower than it had before, and Wade launches off the ground, and in one motion catches the moth between his paws and brings it down to the ground and then eats it in front of us. I slept with a mother, and now I'm sleeping with her daughter. Okay, so there's something on my mind that I really need to share. It's a bit awkward, but here goes. A while back, when I was 19, I met a woman who was a bit older than me, in her 40s. She seemed much younger, like 25. We hung out a few times and, well, things got intimate. But afterward, she felt it wasn't right because of the age difference and stopped seeing me. Fast forward to now, I've been dating my amazing girlfriend for almost a year. Recently, I met her family for the first time, and guess what? Turns out her mom is the woman I had been with before. It was like a surprising twist in a movie. Now, I realize they both have a similar look, and I can't help but feel a bit embarrassed about my past actions. It turns out I was involved with my girlfriend's mom, who's been happily married for 20 years. I feel really ashamed about it. Then her mom contacts me, and she's worried that if the truth comes out, it might upset her daughter and her family. So, I've been asked to keep this as our little secret. I'm not sure how to handle this. Thanksgiving is coming up, and my girlfriend invited me to spend it with her family. Since my own family lives so far away, I can't really say no. So now I'm faced with the awkward situation of having Thanksgiving dinner with the woman I had an affair with, her husband, and their daughter, who I truly care about. It's a tough spot to be in, and I feel really stuck. Obviously, I want to keep my relationship going, but I feel like if I don't tell her and her father, I'll feel guilty. I didn't do anything wrong, but I feel like I did. A spoiled rotten kid decided to throw tantrums at the store and called his mom idiot. I farted on him. One time, I was pretty drunk with a friend at a Target buying Risk. This little 7-year-old Mexican with a mohawk was being an insufferable little poop in the action figure section. I heard him from like 5 aisles over and it was like nails on a chalkboard. I told my friend, I'm gonna fart on this kid's head. Watch and learn. I saunter on over to the aisle in question and see the vile little pre-CK calling his mom an idiot for not buying him a huge fucking G.I. Joe vehicle. The mother said, I already bought that one for you and you broke it by throwing it down the stairs. Rudely, the kid shouted, shut up. I need IT. It's the only one I don't have now. The mother gave a defeated look, I don't have enough money right now. The boy said, you are an idiot, and continued to just berate and publicly shame this woman. At the time, I was on a strict Chipotle carnitas burrito diet. And while I was watching all this, my stomach gave me an initial warning gurgle, telling me I was about an hour away from punishing the toilet. Serendipity. Destiny. I went 1 inch a bit closer to my prey, inspecting some wrestling toys and pondering the weird homoeroticness of the whole sport in general. The kid shouts, F you, I hate you. The mom rolls her eyes and turns her back to the kid to ignore him. And could you believe it, the kid gets on his hands and knees and starts taking the toy out of the box. It's go time, mother effer. I position my back towards him and at this point I'm like 2 feet away from him. His head is down, getting frustrated with those goddamn twisty tie things, and I go for the kill. I bend down to reach for one of the toys on the lower shelf. At this point, my SS is inches away from this kid's head. Now, generally speaking, the best way to go about this is to act casual, drop your belly bomb, then walk away after a few seconds like nothing is out of the ordinary. I have my head tilted back looking at this kid out of the corner of my eye, to ensure accuracy. I'm so close that from a distance it looks like I'm about to sit on him. My friend sees this happening and can no longer contain himself. He's covering his mouth, but his hee-haw hyperventilating donkey chortle is fairly audible over the late 90s pop music playing on the loudspeakers. The kid immediately looks up towards the laughter, but can't help but notice there is an SS now directly in his face. I'm trying not to laugh but also panicking as I just made eye contact with him. He furrows his brow and I look over in the mother's direction, still back towards us. I relish in the moment and the look on this child's confused and naive face. The initial blast was mighty and boisterous. I swear I saw his hair blowing in the wind. If I wasn't wearing jeans, I think it could have probably blown over an empty soda can. I would call it a very fun fart. However, what immediately followed that out the chamber was truly horrifying. The fart's implication changed without notice and swiftly. It went from a joyous, dry air horn squeal, to a nefarious, hissing mephitis. I think the little moppet noticed the hateful metamorphosis before I even did because he wretched his neck violently trying to get away from the personified evil being fumigated into his soul because of his positioning, hovering over the toy, hands and knee. It was all in vain as the only way out was forward and forward would mean certain death. I had positioned myself well on the higher ground, free to escape or relent at any time in him, poor and immobilized, biding his time until the cruel attack was over. Obviously, this child needed to reread Sun Tzu. In total, it lasted about 4 seconds but for that kid, it must have seemed like time was frozen. The long-term severe brain damage which he no doubt suffered, only added to that effect. When I finished with my bid, there was a silent, pregnant pause. The kid was clearly shocked and stunned. No one had ever stood up to this dwarf sociopath in his whole life. I had taken the words out of his mouth and filled it with fart. I make my move first, picking up the toy I was reaching for off the low shelf, take a few steps forward and stare at it for a few seconds. The only thing the kid could manage to do was burst into tears. The mom turns around to see her kid with an open toy, crying on the floor and me minding my own business. She walks up to him and asks what's wrong but the kid can't speak. All he gets out is, bawa fart bawa. It took every fiber in my body not to laugh. I put the toy back on a middle shelf, turn around, give a final nonchalant look-see and then begin to take my exit. Sensing that his assailant was getting away scot-free, he somehow managed to compose himself for a moment. He shouts, "He farted on me." I could feel him pointing at me but I continued to act like I was just browsing. I was almost around the corner when the mom goes, "Excuse me, sir." I turn around nonplussed, who? Me? While pointing to myself. Yes. Did you just fart on my son? Weighing my options, I played dumb. What? I mean, I did fart. On my son? Well, I mean, technically speaking, what is on? Why did you fart on my son? At this point the little kid has the look of schadenfreude on his face, happy to see me in trouble. Fuck you, I'm a man. I will fart on you if I please. I turn my attention to the little kid and stare at him, because the whole store could hear him being a little, rotten asshole to his mother so I thought I'd come over here and treat him like one. I can't escape the feeling that I'm the worst thing that ever happened to my wife. My wife and I have been married for 7 years, and we have 3 kids. The 4 of them are my life and my world. Before I met my wife, I had no purpose, no drive, no goals or ambitions or dreams whatsoever besides getting married and having a family. Thing is, my wife is extremely driven and ambitious. I constantly feel like I'm being dragged along behind her, struggling to barely keep up, and my inability to match her energy is a constant disappointment to her. I have grown a lot because of her. I've stepped into an actual career, matured a lot as a person, gotten into better shape, among other things. And to some degree she's glad for that growth. But even still, if it weren't for her and our kids, I never would have cared about any of that. If I'm honest, I probably would go back to not caring if they were out of my life. My wife knows who she is, who she wants to be. She knows what she wants her life to look like. But me? I don't even know what I am, let alone who I am or want to be besides a decent husband and father. But what kind of goal is that? For my entire existence to be wrapped up in my wife and kids. On my own I want nothing, have nothing, am nothing. I'm just a big empty space in the world. And it's not even like we have anything in common to bond over. We could hardly be more different. Literally the only reason we met, dated, and got married is because we were young, desperate for affection, and in the same tiny fundamentalist Christian denomination. But as we've realized how bad the teaching of that church was and moved away from it, all we can really see anymore is our differences. And it seems more and more like I do nothing but hold her back. It feels like things would be so much better for my wife if I were just out of the picture. She could find a man who actually meets her expectations, actually shares her dreams and ambitions instead of half-heartedly supporting her from the sidelines. My kids are still young enough, they could grow up most of their lives with a father who actually knows how to care for them. And I would just fade away, and dispose of myself somewhere no one would ever know or care. Sure, it would hurt her for a while, but she would be so much better off in the long run without me. To those of you who have been incarcerated, who was the strangest inmate you ever encountered? And what eventually became of him or her? There was this guy who we will call Bob. Not his real name. He always looked at people with a cold stare. He rarely talked and never smiled. One day I went to chow because the meal wasn't that bad. He sat down opposite of me. Others that were going to sit with me sat at the next table. Bob stared at me as he ate. Never took his eyes off me, never looked at his plate or looked around. Just stared at me. This is the way he did everyone, but it was my first encounter that close to him my workout partner said, "Hey Harv, come over with us." I wanted to, but I also felt if I moved he would think he intimidated me, and to be honest I was nervous. So I just stared back. A couple years later I saw him in the dog program and he was outside with a dog. He was smiling and laughing as he talked to the dog. I walked up and asked if I could pet the dog and he said with a big smile sure. I told him that it was the first time I ever saw him smile and asked what made him so happy. He basically told me the dog made him happy and that being in the dog program gave him purpose. I already knew the dog program was a good program, but this definitely confirmed it.
Identical twins of Reddit, what's the greatest thing you've achieved by swapping places, without anyone noticing? My twin and I have swapped places successfully in many situations, but the most recent was probably the best. My brother is an adjunct professor at a local university teaching web design. None of his students knew he had a twin. On April 1st, I came in to open the class instead of him. I casually said hi to about 20 students, discussed questions about a project, making it up as I went, and even discussed a student's grade before opening the lesson. No one noticed anything out of the ordinary. About 5 minutes into this, my brother threw open the classroom door and stepped in. He pointed to me and said, "Who is this imposter?" We didn't know how they would react, but we thought it would be a lot louder. Instead, most of the students' mouths dropped open and they just stared back and forth in complete confusion and terror in a few cases. Finally, I broke in and said that I was teaching my class, as usual, and who was this guy interrupting? He dashed up to the front and said it was his class and I should leave. We then asked the students whose class it was and about half got it right for bonus points and half got it wrong. Either way, we clearly made their day and we haven't been able to play this trick again for the past few years because it still gets talked about.
Today I effed up by laughing at my grandmother's funeral. My grandparents lived to be in their 90s, but sadly no one lives forever. My grandfather died at the age of 93 and I think it broke my grandmother's heart. She passed away a year later. I loved my grandparents and had been kicking myself for not going to see them as often as I should have, so I was pretty upset on the way to the funeral. My sister Leah could see how upset I was and she did her best to make me laugh that day. It started on the drive to the funeral as she randomly leaned out the window and yelled at random passersby asking if they wanted snacks. My sister and I have a weird sense of humor and she knew it would be random and funny enough to make me laugh, which it did. I was feeling a bit better by the time we got to the funeral home, but carrying the casket out to the hearse was upsetting. So as we're in the funeral procession, Leah kept it up, yelling through her rolled up window at people on the street who can't hear her asking if they wanted snacks. I was in tears by the time we got to the church, but this time from laughing. We carried the casket inside, then took our seats. Leah and I didn't want to be near the front, so we sat in the pews a few rows back. Both sides of my family are pretty big and I'm not the most social person, so I only ever see most of them at gatherings like this. I mention this because it's important to know that there are plenty of people in my family who I've never met or that I've only met once when I was too young to remember. We were sitting between friends of the family that I only vaguely recognized in front of us and an older woman I didn't recognize sitting alone behind us. The funeral went as it was supposed to go at first. My cousins are very Catholic, so they read Bible verses and talked about Jesus and stuff. My attention was kinda wandering a bit because I'm not into all this religious stuff and I also work night shifts, so 9 a.m. is basically the middle of the night for me. My sister was still mumbling about snacks when I noticed a book of religious songs in the back of the pew in front of us. The book was titled Breaking Bread. I picked it up and just looked through it for a few seconds because why not? My partner, noticing the book, reaches towards the spine where the title is printed and uses their thumb to cover the re in bread, transforming the title of the book into Breaking Bad. Well, here's where I effed up. I started laughing hard. I think all the pain of losing both grandparents was coming out and I just needed something to laugh at. I don't know why, but the absurdity of the image of her thumb covering the spine, the book reading Breaking Bad, and the droning voice of family members reading Bible verses absolutely did me in. I was trying so hard to quietly hold it in, but my laughing made her laugh, and before we knew it the two of us hunched over in this pew in the back of the church at my grandmother's funeral in tears, silently laughing our asses off at the dumbest joke in the world. Leah hands me a tissue from her purse and squeaks out through the tears, "Here, try to make it look like you're crying, hurry. Don't let anyone see us laughing." I dab at my eyes and try to pretend that I'm just crying and sad, but it took almost 10 more minutes for the three of us to compose ourselves. Finally my cousin's speech comes to an end and they do this thing where you turn around and greet the people in the pews behind you. I've seen this at the other church events I've been forced to attend over the years, but I never understood the point of it. The family in front of us turns around and smiles and shakes our hands and says hello, and we say hello back. Then we turn around to greet the older woman behind us and she has the dirtiest, most sour expression of her face. Like, she is staring daggers at us. No smile, no greeting, nothing. She just very curtly shakes our hands and sits back down. She was dressed very nicely, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I, too, sit back down and my partner turns to me and whispers, "Oops, I think we upset a nun." I just laughed it off, again not thinking much of it. Well, it turns out that she really was a nun. But I didn't find out the extent to which I had just fooed up until a bit later. The funeral proceeds and we transport the casket to the cemetery, Leah and I continuing to laugh at what had just occurred while driving there. After I said my goodbyes to my grandmother and we put her next to my grandfather and headed back to the car, my dad came up to me. We chat for a bit and as everyone is driving away he asked me, "What did you do?" Now I didn't know what he was talking about yet, so I asked what he meant and he explained that the nun sitting behind us in the church was my grandmother's sister. I had been silently laughing my SS off in a church, directly in front of my dead grandmother's sister or nun. Needless to say, my parents were not happy with me for a while there, and that great aunt never spoke or looked at me again. My wife is leaving me for being bisexual. My sexuality is something that I have struggled with my whole life. I've felt guilty since puberty and have tried to suppress it. I grew up in a Christian home and married a Christian girl. Even waited till marriage to have intimacy. I'm truly in love with my wife and I can't live without her. The other night it was very heavy on my heart and I told her. She just sat silently and held me as I cried for a little while and comforted me. The next day she says that she doesn't see me in the same light anymore and wants a divorce. I felt sick to my stomach and regretted ever telling her. Yesterday I got a call from the head priest at our church and he told me that she had confided in him about me being bisexual. I couldn't listen to it any longer and I just hung up. I've been an emotional mess ever since. I gave myself metal poisoning to get out of work. So I've got this coworker Stan, and I had a non-essential doctor's appointment yesterday as well as a shift that day, and I asked Stan if he could take it away from me around 4 days in advance and he said sure. However, the shift swap didn't get approved until the day of, and Stan decided he didn't want to do it anymore and flaked 30 minutes beforehand. The policy for calling in sick is that we have to do it at least 3 hours before the start of our shift. I called in and asked my boss what I could do about it. He apologized and said it was on him for not approving the shift on time because Stan called in and said he couldn't make it anymore, so if either him or I didn't come in that day, it would be a no-call no-show on my record. It made me really mad and so I got an idea. A couple of months ago, I took a zinc supplement in the morning before having breakfast because I planned to eat at a cafe before heading to class, and I didn't know it was dangerous to take them on an empty stomach. I got awful stomach problems and doubled over and puked after about an hour, but after a few more hours I was okay again, so I had the idea to try that again and I took 3x the amount I did the last time because I had already eaten beforehand. It gets to my shift time and I'm still feeling okay, so I headed in and was hoping I would get myself to throw up again so I could go home. Unfortunately for me, an hour passed, then 2, then 3 and 4, and I was reaching the end of my shift anyways, and I had already missed my doctor's appointment. It feels like the God of Get Wrecked Kid was staring down at me, because as soon as I got home, I doubled over the toilet and vomited violently, like the puke was just waiting for me to finish working. How considerate.
My brother wants to invite his annoying girl best friend to my wedding instead of his girlfriend, so I told him that his +1 is cancelled and I will be inviting the girlfriend myself. My brother has been with Leah for about 2 years. We all like her. She is super nice. I'm getting married next April and sent an invite to my brother's apartment. We decided to send invites to households and not individuals. For example, our aunt received an invite for her family and not for each individual. Last Thursday, we met at my parents' place. While there, I asked my brother about Leah's dietary restrictions. I know she is a vegetarian for health reasons and cannot have certain raw vegetables. He said she wouldn't come and he was taking his girl best friend, Amanda, instead. Now, their relationship is weird AF. Amanda has always been stringing my brother along, in my opinion. He always denies feeling for her, but let's be real here. Amanda would date other guys, blow off my brother, and then when things were on the decline with her partners, she would be attached to him again. Her last boyfriend broke up with her right around the time my brother, his then ex-girlfriend, Amanda, and her ex were supposed to travel to Spain. What did my idiot brother do? Go with Amanda alone because Amanda was uncomfortable with his ex-girlfriend. He acted blindsided when his girlfriend broke up with him. I didn't even say anything anymore because it's all so weird. So, when he said that, I asked if Leah had other plans, but my brother said that Amanda had asked if she could come because it would be an opportunity to see the old gang finally. I told him I would have invited Amanda if I wanted her there. Amanda is mean and cold. She always makes disparaging comments about other girls. At every event, around 1 hour in, she will make some sort of scene that either has her running away crying or sitting mad at a table telling everyone to leave her alone and then making a cryptic comment about something hurting her. I told my brother I was revoking his +1 and Amanda was not coming to our wedding. He accused me of being misogynistic and bigoted because I don't understand opposite intimacy friendships, which is BS. My husband has a female childhood friend who is his best woman. I love her too and she has been amazing. And she respects effing boundaries. She always included me and made a huge effort when I started dating my fiancé to integrate me into the friend group. Anyway, I said my decision was final. He could take it or leave it, but I would invite Leah because I like her. He screamed at me and told me to keep out of his business. I said to get rid of his weird effing feelings for Amanda. He is mad at me. My mom is furious with my brother. So am I the a-hole? I cheated on my boyfriend and now he's a millionaire. I cheated on my boyfriend when I was 21. I'm 33 now and I still think about it pretty much every day. I've also never been unfaithful since, and I think it's because how he reacted to finding out. I drove over to his house, sat him down at the table, looked him in the eye and said, Jake, I'm really sorry but I've been unfaithful to you. If I was in his situation I would go absolutely crazy. I'd say something like, who is it or, how could you do this to me? Instead he got up, walked to the door and just said, get out. I said, you're not gonna yell at me? And he said, what's the point? So I got up and as I walked to the door I said, I'm really sorry. He just looked at me and said, I don't ever want to see you again. Don't text me, don't call me, don't come to my house and I wish you the best of luck. Remember, this guy is only 21 at the time and he was that mature about the situation. I really messed up and I didn't realize how much of a catch he was until he was already gone. He owns a business now and has a beautiful wife and kids making 3 times more than I do. I'm just happy he's doing good and I hate myself every day for doing that to such an amazing guy. I guess the main point of this post is to show that no matter how bad things are now, it's only temporary and you should use it as fuel to help you be a better person in the future.
Am I the a-hole for not baby-proofing my home? My friend and her 2-year-old son came to visit me last week. She's a single mom and we rarely see each other because we live far apart. I just moved into a bigger apartment, so they came to stay with me for a few days. Everything was fine at first, we had fun, and although I'm not good with kids, I tried my best. One morning we were all in the kitchen, my friend and I made breakfast while the boy was playing with a toy on the floor. After a while, my friend left the room to take a call and was gone for a few minutes. I'm not used to having kids around, so I didn't think twice about leaving him alone when I left to go pee. My friend was just in the next room, the door was open too. I also had to walk through the living room to get to the bathroom, so she knew I was leaving him alone in there. When I came back she was still on the phone, explaining something to her coworker, and the kid was still in the kitchen. But when she came back, she noticed a bunch of photos on the floor. I had put them up on my fridge with small neodymium magnets, so we started looking for those but didn't find any. Knowing how dangerous magnets can be for kids, we immediately tried to find out if he ate any, but he just started crying, so I drove us to an ER. My friend was panicking in the car and started yelling at me, "Why do you even have tiny magnets in the first place? You should have told me about it before. Why did you leave him all alone?" I was driving and tried to focus, so I didn't answer her. Honestly, I just never thought about my fridge magnets being a hazard. All was fine in the end, he ate one magnet but it wasn't a big deal as there wasn't any other ones. I was relieved and said, "Let's go home, I'll take down the other magnets and see what else I might have to baby-proof for the next few days." But my friend was still furious with me and demanded I drop them off at a hotel and bring her things because who knows what chemicals I have lying around in child's reach. She can't take her eyes off of him for a second in that house. I tried to calm her down and reassure her that nothing else was going to happen and I'd keep a closer eye, but she refused. She just kept yelling at me. I dropped her off at a hotel and haven't heard from her since. Until this morning, she called and said that she's disappointed that I didn't even apologize for putting her child in danger. That I don't care about his well-being because I don't like children, but I don't want him to die, obviously. And that I was clearly not even worried when it happened. I don't mind apologizing, but am I really the only one to blame here? I never have kids around, and while I did remember to put detergent and cleaning supplies out of reach, I just didn't think about the magnets. I could have done more and maybe shouldn't have left him alone in the room, but she has done it too and I just didn't consider it. I took money from my daughter's college fund for Taylor Swift tickets. I have been saving a little bit of money since my daughter was in kindergarten for her to spend on her college education. Recently, Taylor Swift tickets went on sale and my daughter is a massive fan. We had tickets to go to her last tour, but I got a migraine at the concert because my other daughter challenged me to go without coffee for a month. You could say I was having withdrawals. We had to leave before Taylor even came out on stage and my daughter was absolutely devastated. As such, I promised her we'd go next time she came to Australia and I said we'd get VIP tickets to make up for it. Ticket prices came out and they were more than I was expecting, as I assumed they'd be around the $300 to $400 mark like other concerts. I was wrong. She also got mad at me for supposedly not doing any research and leading her on about what we could afford. And to make matters worse, you could only get the two top ranges of the VIP tickets around $1,200 during the Amex pre-sale, which was basically the only chance you had of getting tickets when I live. Because of this, we agreed that my husband and I would pay the baseline $900 for the cheaper tickets and my daughters could pay the difference, which was roughly $300. However, my husband and I had to take the money out of somewhere, and so we took the $900 out of the savings account for college. I intended for it to be a loan of sorts, but my husband thought they were paying for the tickets and is refusing to put the money back in. My daughter found out about this and is now incredibly mad, saying that we were effectively making her pay for the entire ticket after saying we would pay for most of it, especially after she says it's my fault and I ruined the last concert for her, which was not entirely true, as she got to see Charlie XCX. She is now refusing to speak to my husband and I and has barely come out of her room all day.
My husband is pressuring me to have breast implants so that he could be more attracted to me, so I pointed out that he's not exactly a tripod. I have been married to my husband for over a year. We've been together for 6 years. He's a gym freak, which I don't have a problem with, except when he sometimes tries to impose his routine on me, pressure me into adopting his dietary habits. I exercise, too. Lately, I can't wear a dress without him telling me I look good, but that I would have looked better if I had that breast augmentation surgery. He never complained about my breasts for 6 years until the past 4 to 5 months. I've told him I'm not against it, but I'm not planning to get one. It took me years to regain my confidence because my mother used to make hurtful remarks about my chest as if it were something I didn't achieve. A few days ago, we were having intimacy, and he didn't hesitate to remind me again that I would look 10 times better with the implants, which turned me off instantly. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I said something like, "I know how it feels. Never mind, you're the perfect size. The big ones hurt anyway." He got mad and called me immature and all. Mind you, he's been pressuring me to have the surgery for 4 months now, and I never snapped at him. Edit. We were preparing for his friend's wedding yesterday, but I stayed home. He brought up the surgery again, and I snapped at him. I reminded him that we dated for 5 years before we got married. He had plenty of time to realize I was not good enough for him and break up with me to find a woman with what he was looking for. I do have eyes. He's right. I'm flat-chested but have a nice body overall. He said he loves me and wants to be with me but feels he could be more attracted to me with bigger breasts. I ended up telling him to go alone. I can't shake off the feeling that our recent arguments are taking us down a toxic path. It's not the kind of relationship I want for us. This worth considering divorce over? Other than this, we do get along very well, but I feel like he's taking me back to the days when I would stand in front of the mirror for minutes, thinking I would never find a man who would like me if I didn't like what I'm seeing.
Just got caught self-pleasuring by my stepdad. I'm literally freaking out right now, don't know what to do. This was like 5 minutes ago. I was in the living room couch watching P and self-pleasuring. In my house the kitchen, living and dining room are connected, and our front door is by the kitchen. I had music blasting loudly on the TV and I didn't hear the door open. I was home alone by the way. I'm not entirely sure what he saw, but luckily I managed to get my pants up and then greeted me and walked past me giving me a weird look on his way to his room. I'm not sure if he saw what I was doing, and I'm mostly freaking out because I'm scared he'll tell my mom. For context, my mom is super strict, and 2 years ago, she caught me watching P in my room, wasn't even self-pleasuring, just watching out of curiosity. Well, since then, every night at 10 she takes my phone, iPad, controllers, keyboard and mouse, as well as switches off the Wi-Fi. It took me a really long time to earn her trust, and make her not think I have some type of P addiction. But if he tells her I'm screwed, this'll mean no privacy, no electronics, no money, nothing. I swear I don't have a P addiction or anything, but I'm young, even I need to do my thing every so often, which is obviously something my mom can't relate to. I feel like throwing up right now. I don't know what to do. Do I talk to him? Beg him to not tell my mom? Thing is, I'm not even sure of what he really saw, and I really don't want to make things even more awkward between us. We get along, just don't really talk to each other. My mom's on her way from church and I'm panicking right now. People who've had a truth is stranger than fiction moment. What's your most bewildering this can't be happening story? I've always been a fan of the bizarre and the unexplained, but there was one incident in my life that was so bewildering, so outlandish, that it felt like I was living in a surreal dream. I was working as a park ranger at a national park, a job that was as challenging as it was rewarding. One day, while I was on patrol, I noticed something unusual. There was a strange glow coming from one of the caves in the park. Intrigued, I decided to investigate. As I approached the cave, the glow became brighter. It was a beautiful, ethereal light, unlike anything I had ever seen. But what I found inside the cave was even more astonishing. Inside the cave, there was a massive crystal formation. The crystals were glowing with a soft, radiant light, illuminating the entire cave. But that wasn't the most bewildering part. The crystals were pulsating, almost as if they were alive. I stood there, awestruck, unable to believe what I was seeing. I reached out to touch one of the crystals, and to my surprise, it responded. It pulsed brighter, almost as if it was reacting to my touch. I reported the discovery to my superiors, and the cave was closed off for further investigation. Scientists from all over the country came to study the crystals, but no one could explain why they were glowing, or why they were pulsating. That encounter with the glowing crystals was a truth is stranger than fiction moment for me. It was a reminder of the mysteries of nature, of the wonders that are waiting to be discovered. It was a moment that I will always remember, a moment that was as bewildering and as beautiful as the glowing crystals themselves. That encounter with the glowing crystals was more than just a discovery. It was a story of wonder and mystery, a story that still makes me shake my head in disbelief. It was a moment that I will always cherish, a moment that was as bewildering and as beautiful as a scene from a fantasy novel. Divorcing my husband over what my mother-in-law said. I want to say thank you guys first and foremost for all the support that was given throughout this week. But please get your snacks and wine or whatever because I am very petty and I'm probably TA for the things I did. But do I care? No, because sometimes revenge is very sweet. So on Monday I met with the lawyer and first and foremost I wanted to make sure my source of income was secure. And secondly I was to make sure, at the time, that if I were to go through with the divorce I was 100% protected. And I am, but me still trying to be a wife and still having love for him even though he didn't do his job as a husband I still wanted to work it out. Say it with me guys. You're dumb. But anyways I met with my husband and his mother and it went smoothly at first but it was still tense. So my husband says he is sorry and he apologized like 1,000 times so I'm okay. So his mother says I am sorry as well and I nodded. Then she goes on to ask if you can still help me with the house and bills. I still told her no. She looked so confused and said but I apologized. I said just because you apologize doesn't mean I'm ready to accept it and you're not going to bully me into thinking otherwise. She got so angry her face turned red. And she said and I quote you self-centered B, your kind is always self-centered and I'm glad my son cheated on you. We are going to get the money from spousal support. I don't know if you guys saw that Fox show Empire when Cookie Leone was going to hop over that table. I almost did you guys because even though she is my grandmother's age it would be like slapping my grandmother. And therapy works for some. So instead I laughed. I looked at my ex-husband. He couldn't even look me in the eyes. So I knew it was true. After I finished laughing I said to my dear husband that the divorce papers will be delivered to you by tonight. And you aren't getting shit from me because that prenup that you signed 5 years ago. Yeah you are effed. Meaning he ain't getting shit. After that I paid for my food and left. Since then I moved out of his house. And that house his mom wanted to redo or renovate. She got evicted because she wasn't paying her bills, she was waiting for a handout. So I am buying that house. Ex-husband is staying with his brother and so is his mother. So for all of this I deserve a vacation. So as for revenge on my husband because of course divorce isn't enough for me. I wanted to make him regret everything by living his dream. I am moving to Malibu to live the rich life but not only am I moving there, I also bought the house he has been looking at for years. And my kind will be staying there for Christmas. But other than that I am doing great. It's like a huge weight has been lifted from my shoulders. Thank you for reading and all the blessings that been sent my way. I do appreciate it and all the support. Haunted by guilt, I assaulted someone 9 years ago. How do I reconcile with my past? When I was 14 years old, in my freshman year of high school, I attended a party at my friend's house. At the party, alcohol was involved, and the next morning, my friends and I were recounting our memories from the previous night. That's when a boy, whom I will refer to as H for convenience, who was 13 at the time and in 8th grade, approached me with a shocking claim. He said that during the night, he woke up to find my tongue in his mouth. I was taken aback by this revelation because I had no recollection of making out with someone who was sleeping. However, my memory of the night was hazy due to the alcohol consumed. What I do remember is engaging in consensual kissing with another boy, T, who was 15 years old at the time. We were in a dark room in my friend's basement, and that was a completely different situation. I vaguely recall attempting to kiss someone, presuming it was T, but he did not respond or reciprocate. Feeling rejected and confused, I stopped kissing him. About 6 months later, one of H's friends, who was 14 at the time, made an inappropriate comment suggesting that I had done something inappropriate to H. This comment deeply affected me, and both immediately after and in the years that followed, I obsessed over the incident. I questioned the truth of what had happened and the severity of the situation. I worried if I had traumatized H for life. Unfortunately, I couldn't recall the details of that particular incident, no matter how much I tried. After the passage of 6 years, I reached out to H to seek clarification and apologize. He recalled that during that night, we were in a dark room, and he was both high and tired. He mentioned that I seemed quite intoxicated and initiated a kiss with him. He admitted feeling young, scared, and confused since he hadn't had much experience kissing girls. However, he reassured me that he didn't view the incident as significant. Because, to him, it was just a kiss. I offered my sincere apologies and explained that I believe I mistook him for T in that dark room. Despite this conversation, I still struggle with the aftermath of this event, constantly haunted by it. I spend countless hours ruminating on what happened. It makes me question my place in society, and I feel undeserving of my job and friendships. People around me try to console me, assuring me that this incident was most probably an accident. However, since I can't remember the specifics, I have no means to validate whether it was accidental or not. I'm at a loss about what to do. This incident weighs heavily on me, affecting every aspect of my life. I feel overwhelmed and often consider myself deserving of punishment or worse.